From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to a special edition of Balance of Power. Alongside Joe Matthew, I'm Kaylee Lyons.
An hour from now, President Trump will address a joint session of Congress with new tariffs in place against China, Canada, and Mexico, and a possible government shutdown just 10 days away.
We'll be joined by Republican strategist Mark Short on the political implications of this speech tonight, and by economist Claudia Sahm on the impact of the new tariffs.
And as Ukrainian President Zelensky tries to appeal to President Trump following what he describes as a regrettable meeting in the Oval Office, we'll talk about the U.S.-Ukraine relationship with former Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta. Kaylee, we're counting down here to the arrival of President Trump, his triumphant return, as Speaker Johnson termed it today before this House chamber. Not a State of the Union, because he hasn't been in office for the typical year before we call it that, but he's got a long stem winder ahead. From what we understand, they've carved out a lot of space for the boss.
Yeah, and what a long way he has come to get back to this moment. The last time he addressed a joint session like this was in February of 2020, in between an impeachment trial and a pandemic that shut down the country for months and ultimately impacted the results of the 2020 election, in which he also competed. So in some sense, this is a victorious return for him, as he is also addressing a joint session of Congress with both chambers of Congress in Republican control.
A notable difference with a Republican speaker sitting behind him along with his vice president tonight. So let's go there now as we start things off live from Capitol Hill with Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern inside the ornate statuary hall through which lawmakers and other dignitaries will enter the House chamber this evening. Think of it as our red carpet. Anne-Marie, how's the mood before the president arrives?
Well, a lot of Republicans are in Statuary Hall, Joe, and they're really jubilant about what the first 6 weeks, we're in the 6th week of Trump 2.0, and what he has delivered. I could tell you what a lot of people here are keen to learn more about is what the president actually is going to say this evening. We didn't get any excerpts of potentially what he plans to say on this speech. We only know that Truth Social post in which he said he's going to tell it like it is. What sources have said to me is you can expect him to really focus on the domestic agenda he has in the United States, the American first priorities. So what comes to mind? Obviously tariffs, especially as that has taken financial markets by storm today. We did hear from Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick earlier on Fox News saying that he's been on the phone all day with his counterparts in Mexico and Canada, and tomorrow we will hear more. He said none of that pause stuff, but we will hear more, hinting at potentially the level of 25% might actually be lowered. I did see a key man that is part of those tariff negotiations, Jamieson Greer, the new ambassador for USTR, walk through what you would call the red carpet. He did not stop for questions, though. And then another agenda point we might hear tonight from the president, Joe, you brought up earlier, and Kaylee, is the fact that he is here speaking to lawmakers, and he wants to make sure and very clear to some of these Freedom Caucus members that he does not want to see a government shutdown, and he wants to see a clean resolution go through to keep the government functioning and opening so he can continue working on his agenda.
Well, and that also includes, Anne-Marie, asking of them passage of an extension or making permanent his 2017 tax cuts. To what extent will tonight also be about budget reconciliation?
I think a lot of it will be once he gets through tariffs, and potentially if those are going to be the revenue raisers and the offset for those tax cuts. Of course, there's been a lot of focus here on Capitol Hill, as you both know very well, about the process of this. Is it going to be one bill or two bill? I think the president is going to make very clear this evening, as he has done in the past, that he just wants to make sure that his agenda is enacted. Obviously, though, with such a slim majority in the House of Representatives, historically the slimmest the Republicans have ever had, this is going to be an uphill battle, which is why the financial markets have really been digesting a lot of what they would view as negative news when it comes to trade policy being done first in Trump's second administration, because the tax cuts likely are not going to get done until further out later in the year.
All right, Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern live in Statuary Hall. We'll be checking in with you throughout the night, as well as our signature political panel and Bloomberg Politics contributors who are here with us around the table in our Washington, D.C. studio. Rick Davis, Stone Court Capital partner and Republican strategist, alongside Jeannie Shan Zaino, Democratic analyst and political science professor at Iona University. Welcome to you both. We're obviously just about an hour away now from when we expect the president to arrive at the Capitol. And this is going to be a different kind of reception, Rick, than even the one he received 5 years ago in 2020 when Nancy Pelosi had feelings about his speech.
Yeah, I don't think that this speaker is going to touch that speech. In fact, I think that it's more likely you're going to see adoration from behind him with the speaker. So, look, I mean, it's a subtitle, Make America Great Again. Tonight's, the American Dream. It all falls into the same themes and sympathies of Donald Trump. Everything we heard in his first 4 years, we're probably going to hear again this time as far as the sort of vision of the world and vision of America. But he's got some things to atone for and things he's trying to get done. And as Anne-Marie said, looking at this first 6 weeks, it's really quite phenomenal. Whether you like it or not, a lot got done. And yet we see a lot of economic uncertainty right now. And so as Anne-Marie said, he's going to address, these economic issues with Congress and basically tell Congress, this is what I need you to do. And tariffs, who knows where we're going to wind up with tariffs, but at the end of the day, it's a signature issue for him, and of course, border.
Mm-hmm. So there's the rundown, the menu of options from Rick Davis. Jeannie Shanzano, is this Democrats' darkest hour? Do they sit on their hands all night?
We don't know how they're going to respond. They've been advised not to respond, to let the president speak, and to hold their fire for a midterm that they expect they're going to have a lot of different things to run on. But whether they listen to that advice is another question. But, one word that people have been saying to describe what we're going to hear tonight is fireworks. I don't know what that means, and I'm waiting to see, but they are saying fireworks.
From Trump or Democrats?
From Trump.
Okay.
And so this is what we kept hearing. So I don't know how this is going to pan out. But what we do know is that he is coming to a chamber where Republicans have been advised by their own Republican leadership to stop going to town halls with their own constituents as a result of the pushback they've been getting at those town halls regarding DOGE, which the president will probably celebrate, and Elon Musk will almost certainly be in the chamber. And also, of course, today, as Rick was just talking about, tariffs. So, it's going to be fascinating to see how these representatives and senators on the Republican side respond to a president who has put them in a position of not being able to go and talk to their own constituents at this point.
Well, and when we consider how Republicans may be thinking about the words of the president, there's the issue of Ukraine as well. We were all together when President Biden gave the State of the Union last year. He opened those remarks with Ukraine, talking about the U.S. standing by Ukraine in the face of Vladimir Putin. I would expect, Rick, that is not what we're going to be hearing from President Trump this time around.
Yeah, currently Donald Trump is having an argument with the president of Ukraine, less about the war and more about the personal relationship and sort of where we go from here as far as any kind of a negotiation, whether it's on minerals or whether it's on, a ceasefire or whether it's on the end of the war completely. So that is really in flux. And even though tariffs seem to move around, nothing's moving around as fast as Ukraine negotiations. And so maybe he'll have some good news there. And, of course, we know Donald Trump likes to talk about good news. So I would expect, and this is what I'll be listening for, is does he announce that they've now come to an agreement on a minerals deal, and we can get back to where we were last Friday, which is Zelensky's coming to town, or we're just going to sign this thing without him traveling, and get that first step toward the end of hostilities in Ukraine. And I think that would be a big moment in this speech tonight.
The theme of this address, according to the White House, is the renewal of the American dream. Wall Street does not seem to feel that way at the moment, Jeannie. If you look at the last couple of days' market action in response to all this tariff news, does Donald Trump need to speak to the market tonight and make the case for tariffs?
I think he does, and I think it's beyond the market. I think we're seeing in public opinion polls, Donald Trump got elected because he said he would bring down costs for the average American. And he's only 6-7 weeks in, so it's very early. But according to the polls, that has not happened. And now, to your point, he has put in these tariffs, which arguably in the next few days are going to make prices at the grocery store, where average Americans like us go, higher. So I think what he's got to do is explain explain why this pain is worth it. And that's what we haven't heard yet. Or he's going to have to dial back these tariffs, because if he can't explain why this pain is worth it, the American public is not going to stick with them. And we will hear that likely from Elise Slotnick when she talks for the Democratic response right after the speech, depending on when the speech ends.
Well, as recently as 2 weeks ago, Rick, we were watching a different speech from the president at the FII Saudi Investment Forum that was taking place in Florida, where he was touting records in the stock market and a rally we were seeing in Bitcoin. A lot of that has now gone away. Does that mean he doesn't touch the markets with a 10-foot pole tonight?
I don't think so. I mean, he finds things to blame the downturn on, right? And then whenever there's an uptick, he takes credit for that. Even during the Biden administration, when the markets were on a real run, he said that's because everybody thinks I'm going to be elected president. So I don't think he shies away from any of these issues, right? He has his own way of internalizing the hit and moving beyond it and manufacturing a message that uniquely only Donald Trump could do, right? And he has no guile in that respect. So you can't assume that he's going to leave anything alone. And I think he's going to really try to cover the waterfront. I mean, he's known as someone who loves to pack a lot of stuff into a speech, right? And he doesn't care how long he goes. And I think that the speechwriters at the White House have probably been working overtime to throw every little aspect of public policy that we're hearing today into this. And I agree, one thing Jeannie was talking about with Doge, it'll be interesting to see how he talks about Doge, because it's been in the news so much. You see some polls coming out now saying that the popularity of the Doge initiative seems to be waning, and I'll be interested to see just how much he rallies for Doge tonight.
This is a great setup from our panel. Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano, thank you so much. Our signature panel will be with us throughout tonight's special coverage, so buckle up. Market jitters circling the globe, of course, after tariffs on our major trading partners went into effect today. The story may be more complicated than that, though. For more on our markets, we turn to Bloomberg's Esha Day. Esha, thanks for being with us as part of our special coverage. The market seems to be speaking pretty clearly here, but now the Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick says Canada and Mexico tariffs could come off as soon as tomorrow. Does that mean we're in for a rally?
Hi, and thanks for having me on. Well, that's what the futures market apparently seem to be saying for sure. As I last checked, futures on the two main indexes that investors watch most closely, the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ 100, which is a very tech-heavy index. Both of them are up like 0.5 percentage point right now. And, we have seen the S&P 500 drop like more than 3% over the past 2 days. More importantly, what we saw the S&P 500 do today is take away a level that investors have been watching very closely. So the S&P 500 closed down 1.2%, but it also closed below the level it was trading at before the November 5th election day. So stocks are essentially now down very slightly since Donald Trump won the election. And that is something investors have been watching very closely, because there has been this understanding that even though markets are being kind of roiled by all of this uncertainty, especially when it comes to tariffs and trade wars, this might be the level where the administration feels the need to kind of step in and can take out some of the fear that has been really disturbing the markets.
Well, so when the markets have an ear on this here on Bloomberg TV and radio tonight, Esha, other than looking for clarity around tariff policy, is there anything else they'll be watching in particular or listening for?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think the biggest thing that people want from this speech is lack of uncertainty, right? So that's definitely when it comes to tariffs, but also when it comes to geopolitics. That has been something that has been a point of a lot of uncertainty recently. Inflation is something that this administration came to power on. They campaigned hard against the high inflation, and that's something that investors, both people who are investing big money and retail investors, want to be seen tackled as soon as possible. They want to get a sense that that is a fight that this administration takes seriously. And then, of course, economy. Of late, we have had a slew of economic data, and some of the sell-off that we have seen recently in equity markets has also been kind of related to that understanding that the economy kind of under the surface might be slowing down a little bit, and they want to get a sense from the president that there will be actions taken on it, because tariffs is definitely something that is making the situation worse and not better.
What are you going to be watching then during this speech? They tell us, Esha, it could be the better part of 2 hours. What should investors be listening for?
Again, I think tariffs are the biggest thing. It's not like people are expecting them to come out and expecting the president to come out and give very specific understanding of how negotiations are going on, but they want to get a sense that this administration will step in and kind of take care of the fear that is really ruling the markets right now. That is definitely something. And one other thing that has been big for equity investors and investors in general, especially during the campaign, and kind of a lot of investors that I speak to feel has not come up as much as they expected to, is tax reform. And that is something they want to get a sense of how committed the administration is about tax reforms at this point. They want to hear more about those parts and maybe a little less about the trade wars and the tariffs that we have been hearing.
Okay. Got it, Carlos?
All right, Bloomberg's Esha Day, thank you so much. And as we consider everything else we may be hearing tonight, we turn now here in Washington to Bloomberg's Mario Parker, here with us in our Washington, D.C. studio. Mario, so we don't actually know exactly what the president is planning on saying. We haven't seen anything released by the White House about his planned remarks. Should we expect that, or is this just going to be a surprise to all of us 45 minutes from now?
I think it'll be a surprise to all of us, right? So that's kind of breaking a little bit of precedent. Usually by now we'd have some excerpts. We know that the theme is going to be talking about renewal. We know that he'll talk about geopolitics. We know he'll talk about tariffs. We know he'll talk about his record over the first 40-some days here in office, including immigration, crackdown, some of the successes he's had on the border as well.
Okay, we're talking about the better part of 2 hours. Is Donald Trump in for a bike drop kind of a night? What's the mood going to be in the room? When you consider the audiences, he's speaking to Republican lawmakers, I suspect, but also people at home.
Yeah, well, there's a lot, right? There's the disjointed message that Democrats have right now. They can't land on just one single way to punch back at the president in the way that we saw them doing so during the first term. And I think in high school football parlance, it's homecoming day. We know he's been looking forward to it, and it's raining outside, at least based off of what the markets have shown, right? Mm-hmm. So some of the uncertainty that he's giving toward the markets with the tariffs, the back and forth, you saw Howard Lutnick kind of come out with comments about maybe there's a pathway for some type of relief as soon as tomorrow as well. You're just seeing a lot of the dyspepsia in the market as well. So we know that the president likes to look at the stock market as a barometer, and he enters this speech with what voters sent him to the White House with for a mandate to fix the economy. He entered this speech with a blinking red light in the form of the stock market.
Well, on the subject of that mandate, he argues that it wasn't just a mandate for him as the executive, but a wider mandate for Republican control of Washington, hence the two chambers of Congress being a Republican majority. Describe for us, Mario, how different that is, how much more pliable Congress seems to be, this Congress in particular, to what the president wants versus what he experienced in his first term, where we typically see the relationship between the executive and legislative branches.
Well, we see right now that the party at least is largely acquiescing toward the president, right? They look to be on a glide path to passing his tax cuts, et cetera. But again, when we look at some of those images that we were getting from the home districts, there does seem to be some turbulence in the force. I mean, we can't underscore it enough just how much the economy factored into the last election and how little has been done just yet.
How much news does he want to make tonight when it comes, for instance, to a deal with Ukraine? Or will he say openly tariffs are coming off as of midnight tonight in Canada and Mexico?
Well, in terms of Ukraine, our sources are telling us that Republicans, by and large, across the town, are optimistic. Right? They feel as though Zelensky has shown some contrition earlier on. I'm not sure it has been enough contrition for the president, given the images that we saw last Friday. That's to be seen. But again, our sources are telling us that there is some fresh optimism there on Ukraine, and the maximum, the best case scenario would be an announcement toward some type of deal during the speech. In terms of tariffs on Canada and Mexico, again, just going back to what Howard Lutnick said, that maybe he's been on the phone all day with his counterparts in those countries, and maybe there's some type of pathway to relief. Not necessarily a pause, but some type of relief as soon as tomorrow.
You wonder how many headlines we might get before midnight. Bloomberg's Mario Parker helping us with our coverage in Washington. Thank you so much, Mario. As we now add the voice of Mark Short, former chief of staff to Vice President Pence. Mark, it's it's great to see you, especially on a big night like this in Washington. And I want to start there, 30,000 feet with you. We've been down on the granular on tariffs, on taxes, on so many other issues, Ukraine. But speak to the stakes tonight, political stakes on what is a grand American tradition, addressing a joint session of Congress.
Well, the president loves the drama, so I would certainly imagine he'll be looking to make news at some point tonight, maybe more than one time as far as nuggets he drops in the speech. But I also think that the president was largely elected to secure the border and to fix the economy. And I think on the first issue, he's got a lot of progress he can point to quickly because he can do that by executive action. On the latter, it seems that, we're now having questions whether or not the first quarter actually had a retraction. There's a lot of uncertainty on a trade policy, and it seems that his pro-growth deregulatory agenda and tax reform is in conflict with his trade agenda. And so I think there's a lot of questions around the economy that he needs to address tonight.
Well, I guess the question is why he needs to address it, knowing that the last time he gave a speech like this was 2020. He was actively campaigning for re-election. When we last saw an actual State of the Union, President Biden was at that time campaigning for re-election. Donald Trump is giving this speech tonight, having returned to the Oval Office, yes, but having done so as a lame duck already. He can't be elected a second time. So what's really at stake?
Well, I think that the return is pretty remarkable considering where he was after January 6th and the fact that he's now been reelected as President of the United States. I'm sure it's a pretty triumphant return for him to the Capitol. Having said that, I do think that the economy is one of his driving forces, and I don't think he loves to see the market have the churn that it's had lately, and I don't think that probably there's a lot of feedback thus far that says that the administration is really hitting on all cylinders on the economy. There's a lot of things he can point to that they're doing, whether or not it's DOGE or, again, the border, but I think there's a lot of uncertainty about the economy.
So is there a message specifically to investors, stick with me? He's talked about some short-term pain that might be justified by saving American lives through stopping fentanyl, or is you're smirking. That's not going to work on Wall Street.
I hope I'm wrong on this, but let's keep in mind that Howard Lutnick, as head of the transition, went on national TV and promised America that RFK was not going to be HHS secretary. Okay, so the fact that we're all banking on the fact that he had an interview today and says that the tariffs aren't going to go in, there's going to be a relief tomorrow, I'm not going to believe it until the president says it. So I'm more in the camp that the economic advisors he has around him this time and the national security advisors he has are committed to protectionist policies. And whether or not there's relief short-term tomorrow, it's going to be the mantra of the next 4 years.
Well, and he says there's much more to come. Forget today, which they're describing as a drug war. April 2nd seems like it's going to be a bazooka of additional tariffs, whether you're looking at autos, reciprocal tariffs, 25% on Europe. Mark, do you believe that?
Absolutely. There's 15 additional tariffs the administration has already signaled they're planning to move forward with. And so yes, I think that's going to be what the American people are going to have to get used to. And again, I think that it's very contrary to the pro-growth policies on the regulatory and tax front. I think his trade agenda is very much one that hurts the economy.
Does it jeopardize extending the Trump tax cuts or all of the other items like taxes on tips, et cetera?
Sure it does. I mean, again, the taxes on tips. How many people pay taxes on their tips? To be honest, but I think that
salt is another.
Mario said that that it's on a glide path. I'm not so sure that. I mean, we're really having challenges actually getting a budget that the House and Senate can agree to even get the process started. This is going to be a year-long process, and again, the majority when we passed tax reform in 2017, we lost 12 House Republicans on that vote. Mike Johnson is going to have a margin of 1 or 2 by the end of this year. This is going to be a very difficult extension of the tax relief. And so, no, I don't think this is going to be easy.
Well, so whose faces will you be watching when he's talking about these asks he has of Congress tonight, when they're scanning through the chamber? Is it members of the House Freedom Caucus that potentially are going to be the ones that he actually has to worry about? Because we understand they're meeting with him at the White House tomorrow on this, on government shutdown.
Well, yeah, I think the government shutdown is a whole other risk that's out there, though it's not getting as much coverage. It's basically 10 days away.
Would you bet on it?
I would. I think we're headed to a shutdown because, again, Republicans can't pass government funding on their own. There are enough Republicans on principle who do not support a continuing resolution. They think if Congress hasn't done its job passing appropriations bills, they will not support just a continuing resolution. So you need Democrat votes. And what is Democrats asking to be right now? They're going to ask that all the cuts on DOGE be restored and the federal employees be restored. And I think that's going to be a big impasse. I know the president has said he wants to just pass the CR, but is he going to sign a bill that basically restores all the jobs that they are triumphantly cutting at this point?
Some of those laid-off workers are going to be in the chamber as guests of Democratic lawmakers. They're trying to make a point. Does Donald Trump reach out to Democrats, say, I need your help to keep the government open, or I dare you not to let the government shut down?
I would bet it's more the latter. Yeah. And I'm also...
We keep hearing Democrats are angry walking into the chamber.
Sure. But I think that I feel like looking at where Democrats still are today is, voting entirely against bills that would prevent grown men from participating in women's sports. They're basically, you say, looking to bring federal workers in that have been laid off. And a lot of those stories are difficult, but at the same time, we're at $36 trillion in debt. I think the Americans are wanting to see actually cuts in government. I think a bigger concern, again, is the overall economy, rather than I think some of the things that Democrats seem to be choosing to want to fight battles on.
Well, and as we think about DOGE, Elon Musk is expected to be in the chamber tonight. Is he just as powerful a figure as any of the members of Congress or cabinet secretaries who are assembled for this address?
Probably more powerful, it seems, at this point. But, at the same time, I think that, again, if the Republican administration can save by executive fiat, we can eliminate these jobs. Well, you're setting a precedent for a Democrat administration, too, in future years as well. I think that there'd be a better case to call on Congress to make the cuts that Elon Musk is proposing permanent. That's the way it gets codified into law. Otherwise, I think you're just going to have more of a seesaw on these things.
All right, Mark Short, great to see you as always. Here with us in our Washington, D.C. studio, former Chief of Staff to Vice President Mike Pence, looking ahead to one big speech tonight here with us on Bloomberg TV and radio. But there is another one happening simultaneously, or it's about to be. The annual meeting of the China's National People's Congress is underway. Bloomberg's Steve Engel is joining us now live from Beijing. Steve, we got the growth target, the inflation targets coming in as expected, but how does this jive with higher tariffs from the U.S. that went into effect today?
Yeah, I think that's the calculus that the Beijing leadership is going to have to figure out, because last year, obviously, the Chinese economy was sputtering a bit, even without those tariffs. Now that's an added pressure. They kind of leaned on exports, the Chinese economy did, to keep that growth and meet that growth target of around 5%. But as tariffs are added by the Trump administration, another 10% on top of the previous 10% added just yesterday, it does add to more headwinds for an economy trying to get out of a deflationary spiral. Keep in mind, factory gate deflation has persisted for more than 2 consecutive years. In fact, in the hall behind me, the Great Hall of the People, they have realized that deflation is here for a while. They've lowered the CPI inflation target from 3% to 2%, the first time they've done that in more than 20 years. They also recognize they need to boost domestic consumption, and with that, they are going to be increasing the fiscal deficit target to GDP to 4%, from 3% to 4%. They're going to unleash trillions of yuan into the economy, try and unleash those new productive forces in technology, in solar, in EVs, in areas where they can compete globally against these headwinds, what they call protectionist headwinds coming from the likes of the United States. So 4% fiscal budget deficit target essentially is the highest we've seen in more than 30 years, since 1994. So they are addressing the shortcomings in the Chinese economy right now, as well as the backdrop of increased international challenges.
All right, Bloomberg's Steve Engel live in Beijing on a split-screen night here as we stand by for President Trump to address a joint session of Congress. Thanks so much, Steve, for being part of our special coverage. U.S. officials specifically trying to revive a mineral resources deal with Ukraine, with the goal of President Trump possibly announcing an agreement as soon as tonight in this speech. Let's take a look back at Donald Trump, his comments this year about Ukraine.
We're in the Ukraine war by $200 billion more than NATO. It's ridiculous because it affects them a lot more. We have an ocean in between. I really would like to be able to meet with President Putin soon and get that war ended. And that's not from the standpoint of economy or anything else. It's from the standpoint of millions of lives are being wasted. We've made a lot of progress on Russia, Ukraine, We'll see what happens, but a lot of progress has been made. We're going to stop that ridiculous war. I love Ukraine, but Zelensky has done a terrible job. His country is shattered, and millions of people have unnecessarily died. I've had very good talks with Putin, and I've had not such good talks with Ukraine. They don't have any cards, but they play it tough. You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. We're making a speech. You probably heard about it tomorrow night, so I'll let you know tomorrow night.
Well, it's tomorrow night. It's been quite a journey, and joining us now is Bloomberg's national security reporter, Nick Wadhams. It's great to see you, Nick. Do we expect some news on this? We saw quite a bit of outreach from President Zelensky referring to Donald Trump's strong leadership, regrettable performance on Friday, ready to make peace.
Well, we do expect some news out of this speech. I mean, we are hearing that the administration officials are working, scramblings to get a minerals deal before the speech actually happens. And, you know, it's really anybody's guess whether they can do that. That will depend on Trump. But essentially what we were told is that the administration is basically looking for someone on the Ukrainian side with the authority to be able to sign this thing as quickly as they can so the president can make a speech tonight about this. But you can expect the president, you know, he has been deliberately ambiguous about Ukraine, and you can expect that while he is going to potentially announce this deal, there's going to be some criticism, too.
On the subject of the president, Nick, we are just seeing a live shot that we can show you on Bloomberg television and on YouTube of him getting into his vehicle. He will join the motorcade, leaving the White House now to head to the Capitol, where, of course, he is expected to begin his speech roughly around the top of the 9 p.m. Eastern hour. Not answering any questions from reporters, though, as he heads into the vehicle. I guess he's saving it all, Joe, for the speech tonight.
He's got a lot to say. I thought we saw Elon Musk there walk out of the South Portico as well. So presumably traveling together, certainly in the motorcade, as he will be attending. And we're going to be following the procession here as the motorcade makes its way to the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue. Yeah, and we should note the First Lady, of course, right. Melania Trump, is with him as well. So when we consider, Nick, what we could hear from him on this notion that he wants to get the minerals deal done, at least. What does that change, though, about the nature of Ukraine's participation in kind of the separate deal conversation, the one that is happening, or at least has begun, with Russia, where Ukraine was not at the table?
Right. Well, I mean, it's a great question, but essentially the administration's strategy is, look, do this critical minerals deal. That will bind the U.S. and Ukraine together economically. President Trump has been very deliberate. He is not going to offer security guarantees, but the idea is, listen, we will have an economic partnership that invests us in Ukraine's financial future, essentially, but we're going to leave it to the Europeans to provide some sort of security guarantee. Obviously, for Volodymyr Zelensky, that's not quite what he wants. The French and UK militaries, they've been mentioned as the ones most likely to put troops on the ground. Obviously not nearly as robust as the United States. They have a lot of shortages themselves. So what he really wants is that strong signal to Vladimir Putin. Look, if you violate whatever deal we get, it's going to be the U.S. you're going to have to answer to. President Trump, not quite as committal on that score.
Mark Fogel's going to be sitting with the First Lady as one of many guests in the First Lady's box. Does Donald Trump thank Vladimir Putin from the House of Representatives?
I think thanking Vladimir Putin would be a big ask. Possible he may announce that he plans to meet him at some point relatively soon. So this has been the thing that we've all been expecting, too. When will that meeting happen? President Trump has said he wants it to happen soon. It's expected to potentially happen in Saudi Arabia. We had the meeting of senior U.S. and Russian officials there. He could say, listen, you know, I'm going to meet him. Right now, the pressure, though, really is from both Republicans and Democrats to salvage this thing with Ukraine after that disastrous Oval Office meeting.
All right, Bloomberg's Nick Wadhams. Thank you so much. And we want to continue this conversation now with Leon Panetta, former U.S. Secretary of Defense and former director of the CIA and former White House Chief of Staff as well, who's here with us on Bloomberg TV and radio. Sir, we appreciate you joining our special coverage. When we consider the State of the Union speech we saw from President Biden about a year ago tonight, he began with Ukraine, talking about how the U.S. will not walk away and will not bow down, how Ukraine can stop Putin if we stand with Ukraine. Do you expect to hear that kind of language from President Trump tonight?
Well, I would hope, for the sake of the country and for the sake of our foreign policy, that there's an effort to try to put this issue back on track. And if we can get some kind of mineral agreement, if the United States can restore military aid to Ukraine, I think that would be a very important step to showing the world that the United States and Ukraine are unified in this effort, and that it is very important, obviously, to achieve peace, but it has to be a just peace on both sides.
Mr. Secretary, it's great to see you. As we remember, you have a long business card, and you also spent time as the White House Chief of Staff under a very different administration. And what we've seen over the past 24 to 48 hours with regard to these tariffs, on again, off again, a lot of confusion that's spooking the markets and making people second-guess the messaging. That could be said for the Doge as well. Is this the job of the Chief of Staff to focus the message coming out of this White House?
Well, it's partly the job of the Chief of Staff, but it's mainly the job of the President of the United States. I'm a believer that the responsibility of a President of the United States is to establish stability in our country and to lay out a clear strategy for how we achieve stability. I'm concerned right now that there's an awful lot of chaos and disruption that's going on. And the president needs to address those concerns. The American people are concerned about the economy and whether, as a result of these tariffs, we're going to continue to face high inflation, we're going to continue to have a slow growth in our economy, and it's going to impact every worker in the country. That we're going to have to deal, obviously, with this issue of how we achieve savings. But to have this operation in Doge and the way they've approached these cuts to federal employees, there's got to be a better way to do this within the context of a budget, which is what we did in the Clinton administration when we balanced the federal budget. And lastly, yes, we need a clear foreign policy. For 80 years, the United States has had a clear foreign policy where we have said we are going to be a world leader. We're going to strengthen our alliances. We are going to protect democratic values in the world, and we're going to stand up to dictators and to tyrants. We've got to get back to that policy.
Well, when we consider the foreign policy specifically, Mr. Secretary, well, whether it is tariffs and using them, it seems, at least in part, as negotiation techniques in order to extract concessions from partners like Mexico and Canada, where we have seen them surging resources to their borders with the United States, or threatening for a lesser U.S. presence militarily in Europe, where we're now seeing European nations pledging to spend more on defense. Is there a credible argument that he can make at the rostrum tonight saying, look, it's working, what I'm doing?
Well, I'd like to see it work, but I'm not seeing that. Tariffs are a very blunt instrument. I'm not somebody that agrees that we ought to start trade wars with everybody, particularly those countries on our border. And I really do believe that, given the time, you can resolve these issues with Canada and with Mexico and not have to exert this kind of blunt instrument. I do not believe that's necessary. If you have half the ability at being a deal maker, at being a negotiator, then clearly we can resolve these issues without having it blow up our relationship.
Secretary Panetta, Bloomberg is reporting that Russia has agreed to help Donald Trump's administration in communicating with Iran on issues that include managing its proxies and, in fact, its nuclear program. I don't know if you're hearing anything about this. I wonder if you find it to be appropriate and whether you see Vladimir Putin as part of the audience tonight.
Well, look, I have a different approach to Vladimir Putin. I consider him a tyrant and somebody not to be trusted. Yes, we need to try everything possible to bring him to the negotiating table, but I believe the only way you bring Putin to the table is from strength, not from weakness. And if we can get Russia to the table by making clear that they will not succeed in Ukraine, I think that's the way to do it. And if Russia can help, obviously, in dealing with Iran or in dealing with other adversaries in the world, obviously that would be good as well. But the United States has to understand its role here. And our role is to protect our democracy. The Russian approach is to undermine the democracy of the United States, and that's unacceptable.
Well, and when we consider the role of the United States, Mr. Secretary, there's obviously a role that others play in the shaping of U.S. policy. It is not decisions that President Trump makes alone. There are others that are heading into the chamber now. His Vice President, J.D. Vance, members of his cabinet, thinking here of individuals like the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. To what extent do you believe their voices matter in this particular administration?
Well, look, I would hope that those voices do matter. And I would hope that the president listens to those voices. Because I think the important thing about a president of the United States is that he has to be willing to listen to advisors who have responsibility for defense, for our negotiations, for our diplomacy, for our national security. He's got to listen to those people, and then hopefully work together to develop a strategy that makes clear what the United States of America stands for. I believe in a strong America. I believe that we have to be a country that makes clear to the world that we are going to defend democracy. I believe we have to make clear to the world that we are going to work with our allies to make sure that we defeat our adversaries. Those are the messages I would like to hear, because I think they're critical to our credibility in the world.
It's great to have you back, Secretary. Leon Panetta, the former U.S. Secretary of Defense, former director of the CIA, and yes, former White House Chief of Staff. Thanks for being with us as part of our special coverage. If you're with us on Bloomberg TV or on YouTube, this is a live view of the House floor right now. Vice President J.D. Vance making his way into the chamber for a big night. Of course, he'll be sitting right behind President Trump alongside Speaker Mike Johnson. Senators and other dignitaries gathering here as we wait for the president to arrive. He's already left the White House and will be arriving at the Capitol shortly. President's tariffs targeting Mexico and Canada, of course, took effect today. We've been talking about it a lot as part of our coverage. Recalling here why these were put into place to begin with.
We're talking about a tariff of 10% on China based on the fact that they're sending fentanyl to Mexico and Canada. I'll be putting the tariff of 25% on Canada and separately 25% on Mexico. And we will really have to do that because we have very big deficits with those countries. So essentially, we're putting on a 25% tariff without exception on all aluminum and all steel to protect American workers and bring billions of dollars into our treasury. We're in the process of imposing reciprocal tariffs on any nation that tries to cheat us. We'll be announcing it very soon, and it'll be 25%. Generally speaking, and that'll be on cars and all other things. And the European Union is a different case than Canada, different kind of case. They've really taken advantage of us in a different way. Let's put God number one. Let's put religion number two. Love, I don't know. We got to put that number three, I guess, right? And then it's tariff.
But hold on. This afternoon, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick hinted at a quick reversal, a very quick one, on those same tariffs.
Now, both the Mexicans and the Canadians were on the phone with me all day today trying to show that they'll do better. And the president's listening because, you know, he's very, very fair and very reasonable. So I think he's going to work something out with them. It's not going to be a pause, none of that pause stuff. But I think he's going to figure out, you do more, and I'll meet you in the middle some way. And we're going to probably be announcing that tomorrow.
So a good dose of confusion this evening as we wait to hear from the president on tariffs. And joining us ahead of that speech now, Claudia Sahm, chief economist at New Century Advisors, a Bloomberg contributor. It's great to have you, Claudia, as part of our special coverage this evening. What do you make of this? Is there a cumulative negative economic impact from on-again, off-again tariffs, even if they are, in fact, rescinded tomorrow?
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen in a lot of different settings, if you're in a high uncertainty environment, it delays decisions. Businesses not making investments, not doing the hiring, consumers not going out and doing big purchases. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that those decisions are, never going to happen. But like right now, it can grind things to a halt, and we've certainly seen it in a number of sentiment surveys. Whether you're talking to consumers or businesses, tariffs are not getting a lot of love from the American people right now, and a lot of it is this confusion about what's going to happen next, and we are very much in the early innings.
Mm-hmm. Well, we just got, Claudia, excerpts released by the White House of some of the things President Trump is expected to say in the speech tonight. And among them, tariffs, perhaps no surprise. The line reads as follows: whatever they tariff us, we tariff them. Whatever they tax us, we tax them. Going on to say, we will take in trillions of dollars and create jobs like we have never seen before. Certainly, yes, there is some revenue aspect of collecting taxes on imports, Claudia. But what about the jobs part? How long would that actually take to materialize if it were to be true?
It would take a considerable amount of time. I think one of the things that the administration has chosen here is to move very rapidly. In addition to the confusion around what might come next, the timelines are very short. Often, if you have tariffs, it takes several months. Businesses can look into different kinds of sourcing. Consumers can make different preparations. Right? We have not been given the luxury of that time, and so that choice to move quickly, it's maximizing the pain that we're feeling right now in the uncertainty. And we're going to have to wait for the long-term benefits, and they may be there, right? Like, we can have a different discussion about that. But like, this choice to go so quickly and so chaotically is making that trade-off hard. And it's going to take time to see those employment effects. And if these tariffs are not done well, those employment effects might not even be there. Like, you may preference an industry like steel, but there's a lot of domestic producers that need steel to produce, and they might get hit and end up losing jobs. So it's really complicated to do this right, and it's very hard to do something right if you're doing it this quickly.
Members of Congress are streaming into the House chamber. There we see a live view of former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer at her side, both wearing the colors of Ukraine, seeing a lot of pink as well among Democratic members, female members of the House, with a broader view now. The Vice President and the Speaker of the House are behind the Speaker's rostrum waiting for President Trump. Claudia, a lot of this conversation is centered around confidence. What would a government shutdown less than 2 weeks from now do to make that worse?
Well, it certainly undermines confidence in the ability of Congress to get their job done, right? Like, we're not at a moment where the institutions necessarily have inspired a lot of confidence in D.C. So I think that's that would be on them as an institution. In terms of the macroeconomic effects of a government shutdown, we know how to get through those. They tend to be temporary. People get paid after the fact. So it's really just more of we're not capable of doing basic functioning to keep the lights on. And that's the last thing we need right now, is another hit to the, credibility, the confidence in D.C.
Well, when we think about the confidence of the consumer and how they feel about the economy, we do understand the president intends to say among his very highest priorities is to rescue our economy and get dramatic and immediate relief to working families. He talks specifically about inflation and lowering prices, Claudia, saying a major focus of our fight to defeat inflation is rapidly reducing the cost of energy. We've heard this repeatedly before. Drill, baby, drill is the solution to the problems people are seeing when they look at the price tags they're dealing with. How does energy costs lower the price of eggs, for example?
So very indirectly. Right, and energy is an input to a lot of the production that goes into consumer goods and services, right? There's some piece to that. So it is important. It is an important cost to many families, and we know that when gas prices go high, that causes a lot of suffering, that gets a lot of people angry, and yet that is not the centerpiece of the cost of living crisis, the cost of living issues that we have been dealing with as a country for the past now multiple years. It really requires, and I think when people hear about cost of living, inflation, like they're thinking much more broadly than energy. And, they had been promised relief. I mean, this is difficult to do. I'm not saying, the administration's sitting on their hands, but people were waiting on day one to see some movement on inflation. And frankly, I don't think telling them that energy prices are coming down is going to be sufficient, though it will be welcome.
All right, Claudia Sahm, chief economist at New Century Advisors and Bloomberg contributor. Thank you so much for being part of our special coverage. As we expect, just about 10 minutes from now, President Trump will be making his way to the House chamber. He has arrived on Capitol Hill, but right now senators still seem to be clogging the aisle, Joe, as we see many of them slowly making their way down. And of course, members of the Trump cabinet are assembled as well. We're seeing here the director of the FBI, Kash Patel, and the second lady, Usha Vance, is in the gallery, too.
Elon Musk has made his way into the chamber. He's seated in the gallery, not as an official member, interesting, Kaylee, of the administration. Wearing a suit, by the way. We did notice he's standing alone up there right now, as we also see Donald Trump Jr. in the gallery looking down on the House floor. Ivanka and Jared are there. It looks like a family affair. It looks like there's Eric Trump as well. You can probably count a few more, Kaylee, because your eyes are better than mine. But I suspect that there will be a big moment tonight when Donald Trump calls out Elon Musk and a big standing ovation for the leader of the Doge.
Yes, Tiffany Trump is there as well with her husband. So it does seem that most of the children have gathered for this event. And it does seem that the chamber is getting quite crowded, which I would expect means Statuary Hall is starting to empty out. But that's where we find Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern. So let's check back in with her now. Anne-Marie, we don't have long to go now. How is it up there?
Yeah, we don't have long to go. You just saw the Vice President, J.D. Vance, up at the dais waiting to welcome the President of the United States. Just about 10, 15 minutes ago, he walked through his hall. We did shout a question to him, asking potentially if we'd get that minerals deal when it comes to Ukraine. He decided not to take any questions, but just usher through and be the first one to usher through his former colleagues here in the Senate. But when you look at the excerpts of what we plan to hear from the President of the United States, he will talk about Ukraine. So potentially he will tee up that potential mineral pact after that massive showdown and blow up between him and President Volodymyr Zelensky on Friday. We did hear Zelensky talk today about how he thought that was regrettable and he wants to get back to the negotiating table. As we wait ahead for the president to come, also two things really caught my eye when you look at these excerpts. One, immigration. The president believes that this is one of the main reasons why he has got this mandate from the American people and the reason why he won the election. And also inflation. That is going to be something he talks about. He says it's very high priorities to rescue our economy and get dramatic and immediate relief to working families. All of this comes, though, on the same day and week where we're seeing consumer surveys. We're hearing things from the Target CEO that American consumers are concerned about what these tariffs can mean for cost of everyday goods.
You're seeing almost as many Democrats as Republicans stream into that chamber. Anne-Marie, what is their demeanor tonight? What are they telling reporters?
Their demeanor is really that they are against a lot of the policies they are seeing from this administration, but obviously it's been hard for them to really coalesce around what tagline, if you will. How will they combat the Trump administration? Because it's been a fire hose of news when it comes to every single day. This administration has been everywhere, doing everything all at once. Two things stick out. One is that they do not like the tariffs. They obviously continue to correct you and say these are taxes. They are taxes on American consumers. And when it comes to Ukraine, there has been, as you've been hearing all week, dealing with your show and talking to members up here on the Hill, they are very critical of how the president and his vice president, J.D. Vance, handled themselves in that meeting. And they want to see the president move when it comes to peace, when it comes to Ukraine. But they definitely have a lot of criticism of how he's doing it in terms of speaking a little bit more warmly when it comes to Vladimir Putin in Russia.
Fascinating. Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern. Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. We'll be checking back, of course, through the evening as Anne-Marie is posted up in Statuary Hall just off the House chamber that we're showing you right now live on Bloomberg TV and on YouTube. Speaker Mike Johnson and Vice President J.D. Vance are already behind the speaker's rostrum, and they're standing by for President Trump to join them. A little less than 10 minutes from now, the Sergeant at Arms will enter the chamber with the famous refrain, "Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States." And back with us now, our signature panel, Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis, partner at Stone Court Capital, our Republican strategist, and Jeannie Shanzano, Democratic analyst, senior democracy fellow at the Center for the Study of the Presidency and Congress. We could not do an address to Congress without them. Rick, you're great at framing the significance of a moment like this, whether it's a candidate or an elected president in this particular case. 32 million people watched Joe Biden in the last State of the Union in 2024. What's his audience tonight? How important is this moment?
Yeah, I think, it's probably very important for him right now to make sure that the public is along with him on this wild ride, right? I mean, there have been great successes in the first 6 weeks, and then there's been lots of controversy. And that controversy, as we've been talking about it, has kind of scared consumers. And so I think he's got to talk to them about the fact that, please, we've got this, the plan is working, America's moving forward together, and I have a competent administration that is going to accomplish these goals and get them back on board the way they were with him on Election Day.
Well, and I wonder how much of that is going to mean direct comparison he tries to make between himself and his predecessor, Joe Biden. According to the excerpts from the White House, there is a line in here that says Joe Biden especially let the price of eggs get out of control. And I would note in the document we got from the White House, Jeannie, eggs is in all caps.
That's right. And we may see some Democrats, we heard, either with eggs or egg cartons. So who knows? It's going to be an egg State of the Union. I do think that's in keeping with Donald Trump, though. He is famous for blaming Joe Biden or somebody else for what is now his government, his administration. And so I do think, though, that is the major task for him tonight, is to explain to the American public what they are going through this pain for as it pertains to the tariffs that he put on today. Why, in all of the things he has done, and one thing he gets a lot of credit for is the sheer amount of work he's done over the last 43 days, and Anne-Marie was talking about that. But one thing he hasn't focused on a lot is the price of eggs and the cost of living. He's going to have to start to address that in a more concerted tone. And it can't just be blaming the Democrats and blaming Joe Biden. It has got to be taking responsibility for what we are finding now. After all, he put those tariffs in today, and the stock market responded, and it wasn't a good response.
Well, so to what extent can he talk about this with some credibility, knowing what happened the last couple of days on Wall Street? Rick, does he say that this is still Joe Biden's stock market?
I don't think he wants to sort of chip off the stock market, because he kind of owns that now, and he wants to, right? That's, we're talking about on election night the Trump trade. Well, it's become a Trump put this week. And so he wants that trade to go back up. And he has personal and professional reasons to want to do that. And he's never not going to be influenced by the market. So there is that. But I think secondarily, I think he wants to show that these tariffs that are going into effect and are having a impact on the global economy are somehow going to be good for the American public. And that means bringing in revenue to the Treasury so that they don't get pinched for things that otherwise would require raising taxes, increasing fees, and things like that. So I think they will make the case that his economic policy is sound and that it's going to be far-reaching, and that will then take him to Congress and say, and you better pass those tax cuts, and I've got others that I'd like to heap on top of that. Fix the SALT, give the Social Security earners, that money tax-free. Things like that he's going to add to the pile tonight to try and make it more populist.
Well, and on the things he's asking Congress for, in the excerpts, he says he sent Congress a detailed funding request, specifically talking about the border, but says Americans expect Congress to send me this funding without delay so I can sign it into law. Rick, he does have an ask of them he intends to make tonight.
Yeah, it's more like a demand. I mean, typically presidents go to these kinds of things and say, here's my agenda. I'm asking you for your cooperation. Basically, I think the theme tonight's going to be, I'm demanding you do what I tell you to do. And American people people sent me here to do this, and I'm not going to take any pushback. And so he certainly had that reaction to Republican lawmakers on Capitol Hill already, and I think he's going to try and impose his will on Democrats tonight, too.
So how's that going to go over with the minority?
Well, with the minority, they are very clear that much of what Donald Trump is doing is objectionable to them. But I am more interested in Republicans. This is a Republican Party that you have the leadership telling them don't have any more town halls because your constituents are not responding well to what the administration is doing. And now he's going to demand, in Rick's words, require that they sign off on many things that they are not going to be comfortable with. One of which is a big one, which may require cutting Medicaid, even though the president has said he won't do it. So how do they square that on top of the DOGE cuts, on top of tariffs? And by the way, the president's messaging just in the last few hours on the tariffs has been very odd. Look at Truth Social, where he tells farmers, essentially have fun. Nobody is having fun when it comes to tariffs, particularly not farmers. And many senators, including Johnson and others, have come out and said that is not fun. And so how does he square that is another question.
Well, and as we consider the role that another branch of government, the legislative branch, has with the executive branch, there's also the judicial branch as well. We just witnessed on Bloomberg TV as well as on YouTube, you may have seen this, the justices of the Supreme Court entering the chamber. Should we expect commentary from him tonight, Jeannie, about the courts, which to this point have been the only thing really providing a check on what he has tried to do over the last 6 weeks?
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see. Already, Elon Musk has been tweeting a good deal about the courts, particular justices. Donald Trump, during the campaign, was unhappy with some judges that he had to face. It'll be interesting to see because he's had about 119 EOs so far this term, and there's already over 100 court cases dealing with the many EOs he has passed. And so, to your point, it is going to be the courts that either allow what he wants to do to go forward or put up a barrier. And, does he call them out? One president who did that was Barack Obama, and Sam Alito mouthed something. And, the justices have learned ever since that they should not take the bait and respond, which is why some of them in the last few years have decided to stay home.
Well, Joe Wilson mouthed something, as I recall, as well, which maybe have ushered in a whole new era of lack of decorum. We're about a minute away, presumably, from the Sergeant at Arms introducing the President of the United States, Rick Davis. Well, we'll stop down for that to happen in a moment. Then comes the grand walk down the aisle. This is going to be a lot of hugs and handshakes, I presume, for Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's going to be a slow walk.
Yeah.
And he's going to want to enjoy the adulation that he's going to get. He loves these big moments. He is an orchestrator of these big moments. The symbolism is not lost on him whatsoever. And this is his return to the center of power, right? He was basically banished for 4 years. He had to live every day live tweeting the Biden administration, being angry, being grievance-filled, being prosecuted. And this is his moment where he's back in that chamber where he's been impeached twice, and he is the victorious general coming into Rome to take his place amongst the greats.
Wow.
So this just is the cementing of the political comeback in some ways, I guess, Jeannie.
Yeah, and from the excerpts that we're seeing, he's talking about a comeback for America. So very much in keeping with Donald Trump, everything is personal. And of course, the last time he came in the chamber to deliver this address, it was in the midst of his first impeachment. And as we look at all these folks in the audience on the Democratic side wearing Ukrainian colors, we cannot forget that Donald Trump very much blames Vladimir Zelensky for that impeachment. And we saw that in full display on Friday as he sat in the Oval Office and talked about how he and Vladimir Putin share something in common, how aggrieved they were by that. And so, he now enters with what he feels is a victorious comeback, and he thinks that this is a comeback for America. He's got to be very careful, however, not to overread the mandate he got on election night.
Standing by to hear from the Sergeant at Arms, who will introduce President Trump here shortly. You might have noticed, if you're with us on Bloomberg TV or on YouTube, Kaylee, you pointed out some of the pink clothing that female members of Congress are wearing. We're watching Melania Trump, by the way, make her entrance here to the gallery with a bit of a round of applause, a standing ovation for the First Lady. Conversely, on the floor of the House, dozens of Democratic congresswomen wearing pink to signal their protest of Donald Trump's policies negatively impacting women and families. Kaylee, could be part of the enduring optics of this speech.
Well, certainly. Obviously, we've seen some color coordination in speeches past. White for the suffragettes, also something that has typically been featured as we hear the applause continuing for the First Lady, Melania Trump, who is going to stand in front of her seat in the same row, of course, as the Second Lady, Usha Vance, while Vice President J.D. Vance and the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, are waiting behind the rostrum for President Trump's arrival, which we anticipate any minute now, Joe.
Let's listen now to the Sergeant at Arms.
Mr. Speaker, the President's Cabinet.
Jennifer Hemingway introducing the cabinet. Kaylee, which means we're getting pretty close. Most lawmakers are in the room now. We'll actually get members of the administration, starting with the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, followed by someone we know pretty well on Bloomberg, the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent.
Yes, of course, who has been an ardent defender of President Trump's tariff policies, something we've been focusing on a lot today and do expect to hear more about tonight, perhaps seeking clarity specifically on where tariffs go from here. Just behind Treasury Secretary Bessent, we see the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, as well as the Attorney General, Pam Bondi. So they, of course, now making their way down the aisle to join the others in the chamber. And I do spy Howard Lutnick there as well, wondering if he got ahead of the president at all on what's happening next with Canada and Mexican tariffs.
How true. RFK Jr. streaming in along with the Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, a long line of dignitaries here who will precede the president as well, including the Secretary of Homeland Defense, Kristi Noem. Rick Davis, we heard from so many analysts, most of whom smarter than I, who said many of these people would never be confirmed. And Donald Trump is walking in with a cabinet with basically everyone he selected. You could save Matt Gaetz, but that's a bit of a different conversation than the confirmation process we saw Hegseth and all the others go through.
Not only did he get all his cabinet members through, but he got them in record time. One, he knew exactly who he wanted to appoint the day he was elected and started the process with the transition quicker than anybody to date, and then was able to get Republicans in the Senate to move very quickly. Remember, we were talking about recess appointments at one point. They'll never get through. Maybe we have Congress leave and let him put them in office. But every one of them, really without a scratch, have taken office and are now formed his cabinet.
Well, and incredible as we see the pictures of the cabinet continuing to stream in here. I just got an eye on Elise Stefanik, who, of course, was tapped to be the ambassador to the UN, but her actual confirmation process was delayed, Jeannie, because her vote was needed in the very chamber in which she is now walking into. House Republicans needed her vote to pass a budget resolution last week, and the fact that they aren't going to be able to count on it until a New York special election is held speaks to the difficulty the Republican conference gathered, who is about to get a directive from Donald Trump to make sure his agenda makes it through, is actually going to have in executing on that.
That's right. And, you know, I think we should say how remarkable it is that Speaker Johnson has been able to do what he's been able to do so far with a 1 or 2 vote margin. And, of course, the governor of New York has been under pressure from Democrats to slow walk that special election because, of course, they want to make it as difficult for Republicans as possible. But I think the hardest test, of course, for Mike Johnson is going to be ahead of him, and he knows that. They have the framework in place, but now as we start to see the details, that's where the rubber is going to really meet the road for both the Republicans in the House and the Senate, and, of course, the president, who has yet to have a big piece of legislation passed. Of course, I say yet. It's only 6 or 7 weeks, so.
Stay tuned.
Yeah.
They're working on that, of course, as we wait for the president to join us here. Rick, we're focused a bit on some of the guests they've selected to join the First Lady in the gallery here. Among them, Mark Fogel, recently released from a prison in Russia. These are the types of stories the president will try to fold into this address.
Yeah, I think Mark Fogel specifically, 3.5 years in a Russian gulag, and it wouldn't surprise me that he thanks Vladimir Putin for his release. Look, I mean, he's been cozying up to Putin for quite some time. There are still hostages in Moscow, in Russia, and I think in his own mind, this is how he gets them to be freed, is by not being confrontational but cooperative. So I think that's something. And of course, I've had all kinds of people telling me one of the big announcements tonight would be that he's going to have this meeting with Putin, but not in a place like a neutral country like Saudi Arabia, but that he would go to Moscow and attend the May Day parades, because we know how much he loves May Day parades. But the Comparator family, too, the individual who was killed in the assassination attempt of Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania during the campaign, is in the box. And I think that's a moment for him to really go back to this idea that God has spared him to do the things he is now doing as President of the United States, to make America great. And I am very confident that he'll linger on that message, because I think that has permeated previous State of the Unions for him, this idea that there's this sort of exalted importance of him beyond just being a political leader.
Yeah, incredible to consider, as we already discussed, him returning to this moment, having been twice impeached, also surviving 2 assassination attempts, which I think we all often forget, given the pace of which there has been development in the political universe in this country in the course of the last 6 months. Jeannie, to Rick's point, though, on the suggestion there could be a thank you embedded in this speech for Vladimir Putin, that raises the question of who the audience tonight really is. Is he speaking to Congress? Is he speaking to the American people? Or is this just as much about the foreign leaders in capitals all around the world who will also be tuning in?
Yeah, I think to a certain extent it is all of the above. Certainly to Congress, because he does need to pass major pieces of legislation. That is a legacy for the president. He can't ignore that. Certainly to the American public, because you can't do much without the support, at least of your base and moderates, and that is who got him there. But to your point, Kayleigh, also people around the world. At a time when Donald Trump, in the last few days, last week or two, has taken on our allies in a way none of us could have imagined, and has in many cases, to Rick's point about potentially thanking Vladimir Putin, sided with Vladimir Putin against an ally like Ukraine, sided with Vladimir Putin against Russia, spoke publicly about the fact that the EU was constructed to, quote unquote, screw the United States, and has taken on Canada and Mexico with 25% tariffs. I mean, putting China aside, but those are our allies. So that is where we do that. And I'm not even mentioning the talk about speaking with Iran and what Israel, a very close ally, may think about that. So certainly I think leaders around the world are going to be watching tonight to see what this most unpredictable American president has in store for the next few weeks, let alone the next 3 years.
Well, you wonder if this might get better ratings than most U.S. states of the Union in Canada tonight. Maybe Donald Trump will post that on Truth Social tomorrow. You wonder, Rick, which Trump we get tonight. Obviously, this is a carefully crafted address. You recall the evening they loaded the wrong speech into the teleprompter for Bill Clinton, and he just took the ball and ran with it. We also know this president likes to do that even when the right speech is loaded.
Yeah, look, I mean, he goes both ways. He will have the script. It will be loaded, and he'll refer to it. But there is also this thing, Joe, that you mentioned, which is he loves to go off script. And it's almost as much to probably try and poke fun at his staff. I can do this. People love it. This is who I really am. But we'll get the real script. He'll get that done. But I can't wait to see where he departs from that script to either go extemporaneous and say, expound upon whatever issue is, or go into issues that aren't in the speech at all. And that will be particularly interesting, because that shows that he's been having a fight with his staff. They didn't put it in the speech, but he's going to include it regardless.
Well, if we think back to Inauguration Day, when he basically just read off the teleprompter for the actual inaugural speech, then went to visit the overcrowded, the room with more supporters than could fit. Yeah. Overflow room is the word I was going for. It is 9:12 p.m. Eastern time for anyone keeping track on the East Coast. But, Rick, that speech was entirely different in nature. It was almost like he didn't like being stuck to the teleprompter, and then we saw a massive swing in the other direction.
No lion likes to be caged. And so I don't think we can anticipate that kind of, sort of off-the-rails speech, more like a campaign speech than a presidential inaugural. But again, again, we saw it time and time again during his previous inaugural addresses. So we have, 4 to compare this to. And every one of them, he used an opportunity to depart from the text and go off on whatever tangent that he believes at that time he really needed to convey. Or, again, just wanted to rattle his staff who, was probably begging him on the car ride over, please, just read the speech.
And here is the House Sergeant of Arms.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
And it begins. The House Sergeant at Arms, William McFarland, with the honor of keying the microphone and introducing President Trump, who has now entered the House chamber. If you're watching us live on Bloomberg TV or on YouTube, it could be a long walk here. Melania Trump with the golf applause from the gallery. And there you see the Speaker of the House and Vice President J.D. Vance preparing to receive the president in the rostrum. Kayleigh, when he gets there, he'll deliver a copy of the speech to both of them. But it could be a while before he arrives, and this is already running pretty late.
Yes, indeed. A lot of hands, of course, to be shaken. We understand hours ago, some of these members of Congress were already in the chamber to claim their seats at the aisle so that they would have the opportunity to do what we are seeing right now on Bloomberg TV and on YouTube. Shake the hand of the president as he enters the chamber to give this address. He, of course, just behind him, you see leadership of the House, Steve Scalise, the number 2 Republican, Tom Emmer, who is the whip, the Senate Majority Leader, John Thune, here as well, making the trip down for the second time, having already previously entered the chamber.
Our first red MAGA hat sighting, courtesy of Marjorie Taylor Greene, standing on the aisle. Of course, not a shock, I think, to anybody here as the Sergeant at Arms tries to clear the way. He's actually got a pretty high-pressure gig tonight, Kayleigh, to keep people out of the way of Donald Trump so he can keep walking a fist in the air with obviously a moment we all recall from Butler, Pennsylvania that Rick Davis referred to. I suspect we will hear fight, fight, fight at some point tonight.
We very well could, in addition to a whole host of other remarks we are expecting to get from the Trump. Again, we've gotten the from the president, rather. We've gotten the excerpts from the White House. We know he intends to talk about the economy and how he's focused on lowering prices, touching on the border as well. The 2 issues, which, as we've discussed here with Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano, are the issues where he really feels that he got elected on. And it's on that note, with that mandate, Jeannie, at least in his own description, is with what he brings as he walks down the aisle and gets ready to walk up to the rostrum.
Yeah, that's right. Cost of living, the economy, and immigration. And, thinking about the people in the box with the First Lady, we do see the family of a person who was killed by an undocumented or an illegal immigrant. It's certainly something the president wants to underscore. The administration feels very proud of the numbers and the amount of work they've done trying to secure the border. And so we'll hear a lot about that. We'll hear a lot about costs. And, I'm just remembering that when he walked down here last time and he gave the speech, and we'll see him do this time to Mike Johnson, but last time to Nancy Pelosi, he famously did not shake her hand. And she ended up ripping up that speech. We won't see anything like that tonight, I can't imagine. But that was such a fraught time for President Trump. And I think, of course, we're all wondering how much he sticks to the speech, and Rick was just talking about that.
You said it.
Or how much he weaves, because he likes to weave, and he does it famously.
A big 2-hour weave as he addresses the Joint Chiefs here, having had some words, Kayleigh. A bit of a moment there with Chief Justice John Roberts. He spoke to Brett Kavanaugh as well, shaking hands, but stopped down to have a brief exchange. You wonder what that was all about.
Yeah, Amy Coney Barrett, another justice that was there for that moment, but he has already arrived basically at the base of the rostrum.
That might be
perhaps
a land
faster
speed record
walk down the
Donald
aisle
Trump
than expected. And now we hear chants coming from the Republican side of the chamber.
The first USA chant of the night, indeed, as President Trump shakes a few hands before climbing into the Speaker's rostrum, where he is now arriving. The speech, of course, waiting for him on the rostrum, as we mentioned, along with copies for the Vice President and the Speaker of the House. This probably is not just about to get started. We've got a lot more applause to go, don't we?
Yes, he shakes the hand of his Vice President, J.D. Vance, and, of course, the House Speaker standing there as well, still applauding him as he has reached the rostrum. And now the handing of the speech over to both of those men, as we do expect his remarks will begin any moment now.
We're going to let this breathe for you as we bring you complete remarks here from President Trump, live and unfiltered, on his address to a joint session of Congress. Now just about 5 weeks into his second term in office. Let's listen and watch live on Bloomberg TV and radio as the president joins the standing ovation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's a great honor. Thank you very much. Speaker Johnson, Vice President Vance, the First Lady of the United States, members of the United States Congress, thank you very much. And to my fellow citizens, America is back. Six weeks ago, I stood beneath the dome of this Capitol and proclaimed the dawn of the golden age of America. From that moment on, it has been nothing but swift and unrelenting action to usher in the greatest and most successful era in the history of our country. We have accomplished more in 43 days than most administrations accomplished in 4 years or 8 years, and we are just getting started. I return to this chamber tonight to report that America's momentum is back, our spirit is back, our pride is back, our confidence is back, and the American dream is surging bigger and better than ever before. The American dream is unstoppable, and our country is on the verge of a comeback, the likes of which the world has never witnessed and perhaps will never witness again. There's never been anything like it. The presidential election of November 5th was a mandate like has not been seen in many decades. We won all 7 swing states, giving us an electoral college victory of 312 votes. We won the popular vote by big numbers and won counties in our country. And won 51 counties in our country, 2,700 to 525, on a map that reads almost completely red for Republican. Now, for the first time in modern history, more Americans believe that our country is headed in the right direction than the wrong direction. In fact, it's an astonishing record, 27-point swing, the most ever. Likewise, small business optimism saw its single largest one-month gain ever recorded, a 41-point jump.
Members are directed to uphold and maintain decorum in the House and to cease any further disruptions. That's your warning. Members are engaging in willful and continuing breach of decorum, and the chair is prepared to direct the Sergeant-at-Arms to restore order to the joint session. Mr. Green, take your seat. Take your seat, sir. Take your seat. Finding that members continue to engage in willful and concerted disruption of proper decorum, the chair now directs the Sergeant-at-Arms to restore order. Remove this gentleman from the chamber. Members are directed to uphold and maintain decorum in the House. Mr. President, you continue.
Thank you. Over the past 6 weeks, I have signed nearly 100 executive orders and taken more than 400 executive actions, a record to restore common sense, safety, optimism, and wealth all across our wonderful land. The people elected me to do the job, and I'm doing it. In fact, it has been stated by many that the first month of our presidency, it's our presidency, is the most successful in the history of our nation. By many. And what makes it even more impressive is that, do you know who number 2 is? George Washington. How about that? How about that? I don't know about that list, but we'll take it. Within hours of taking the oath of office, I declared a national emergency on our southern border, and I deployed the U.S. military and Border Patrol to repel the invasion of our country. And what a job they've done. As a result, illegal border crossings last month were by far the lowest ever recorded, ever. They heard my words and they chose not to come. Much easier that way. In comparison, under Joe Biden, the worst president in American history. There were hundreds of thousands of illegal crossings a month, and virtually all of them, including murderers, drug dealers, gang members, and people from mental institutions and insane asylums, were released into our country. Who would want to do that? This is my 5th such speech to Congress. And once again, I look at the Democrats in front of me, and I realize there is absolutely nothing I can say to make them happy or to make them stand or smile or applaud. Nothing I can do. I could find a cure to the most devastating disease, a disease that would wipe out entire nations, or announce the answers to the greatest economy in history, or the stoppage of crime to the lowest levels ever recorded. And these people sitting right here will not clap, will not stand, and certainly will not cheer for these astronomical achievements. They won't do it, no matter what. Five times I've been up here. It's very sad, and it just shouldn't be this way. So Democrats sitting before me, for just this one night, why not join us in celebrating so many incredible wins for America? For the good of our nation, let's work together and let's truly make America great again. Every day, my administration is fighting to deliver the change America needs to bring a future that America deserves, and we're doing it. This is a time for big dreams and bold action. Upon taking office, I imposed an immediate freeze on all federal hiring, a freeze on all new federal regulations, and a freeze on all foreign aid. I terminated the ridiculous Green New Scam. I withdrew from the unfair Paris Climate Accord, which was costing us trillions of dollars that other countries were not paying. I withdrew from the corrupt World Health Organization. And I also withdrew from the anti-American UN Human Rights Council. We ended all of Biden's environmental restrictions that were making our country far less safe and totally unaffordable. And importantly, we ended the last administration's insane electric vehicle mandate, saving our auto workers and companies from economic destruction. To unshackle our economy, I have directed that for every one new regulation, 10 old regulations must be eliminated, just like I did in my very successful first term. And in that first term, we set records on ending unnecessary rules and regulations like no other president had done before. We ordered all federal workers to return to the office. They will either show up for work in person or be removed from their job. And we have ended weaponized government where, as an example, a sitting president is allowed to viciously prosecute his political opponent, like me. How did that work out? Not too good. Not too good. And I have stopped all government censorship and brought back free speech in America. It's back. And 2 days ago, I signed an order making English the official language of the United States of America. I renamed the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. And likewise, I renamed, for a great president, William McKinley, Mount McKinley again. Beautiful Alaska. We love Alaska. We've ended the tyranny of so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion policies all across the entire federal government and indeed the private sector and our military. And our country will be woke no longer. We believe that whether you are a doctor, an accountant, a lawyer, or an air traffic controller, you should be hired and promoted based on skill and competence, not race or gender. Very important. You should be hired based on merit. And the Supreme Court, in a brave and very powerful decision, has allowed us to do so. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. We have removed the poison of critical race theory from our public schools, and I signed an order making it the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female. I also signed an executive order to ban men from playing in women's sports. Three years ago, Peyton McNabb was an all-star high school athlete, one of the best, preparing for a future in college sports. But when her girls' volleyball match was invaded by a male, he smashed the ball so hard in Peyton's face, causing traumatic brain injury, partially paralyzing her right side, and ending her athletic career. It was a shot like she's never seen before. She's never seen anything like it. Peyton is here tonight in the gallery, and Peyton, from now on, schools will kick the men off the girls' team, or they will lose all federal funding. And if you really want to see numbers, just take a look at what happened in the women's boxing, weightlifting, track and field, swimming, or cycling, where a male recently finished a long-distance race 5 hours and 14 minutes ahead of a woman for a new record by 5 hours. Broke the record by 5 hours. It's demeaning for women, and it's very bad for our country. We're not going to put up with it any longer. What I have just described is only a small fraction of the common sense revolution that is now, because of us, sweeping the entire world. Common sense has become a common theme, and we will never go back. Never. Never going to let that happen. Among my very highest priorities is to rescue our economy and get dramatic and immediate relief to working families. As you know, we inherited from the last administration an economic catastrophe and an inflation nightmare. Their policies drove up energy prices, pushed up grocery costs, and drove the necessities of life out of reach for millions and millions of Americans. They've never had anything like it. We suffered the worst inflation in 48 years, but perhaps even in the history of our country. They're not sure. As president, I'm fighting every day to reverse this damage and make America affordable again. Joe Biden especially let the price of eggs get out of control. The egg price is out of control, and we're working hard to get it back down. Secretary, do a good job on that. You inherited a total mess from the previous administration. Do a good job. A major focus of our fight to defeat inflation is rapidly reducing the cost of energy. The previous administration cut the number of new oil and gas leases by 95%, slowed pipeline construction to a halt, and closed more than 100 power plants. We are opening up many of those power plants right now. And frankly, we have never seen anything like it. That's why on my first day in office, I declared a national energy emergency. As you've heard me say many times, we have more liquid gold under our feet than any nation on earth, and by far. And now I fully authorize the most talented team ever assembled to go and get it. It's called Drill, Baby, Drill. My administration is also working on a gigantic natural gas pipeline in Alaska, among the largest in the world, where Japan, South Korea, and other nations want to be our partner with investments of trillions of dollars each. There's never been anything like that one. It will be truly spectacular. It's all set to go. The permitting is gotten. And later this week, I will also take historic action to dramatically expand production of critical minerals and rare earths here in the USA. To further combat inflation, we will not only be reducing the cost of energy, but will be ending the flagrant waste of taxpayer dollars. And to that end, I have created the brand new Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. Perhaps you've heard of it. Perhaps. Which is headed by Elon Musk, who is in the gallery tonight. Thank you, Elon. He's working very hard. He didn't need this. He didn't need this. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Everybody here, even this side, appreciates it, I believe. They just don't want to admit that. Just listen to some of the appalling waste we have already identified. $22 billion from HHS to provide free housing and cars for illegal aliens. $45 million for diversity, equity, and inclusion scholarships in Burma. $40 million to improve the social and economic inclusion of sedentary migrants. Nobody knows what that is. $8 million to promote LGBTQI+ in the African nation of Lesotho, which nobody has ever heard of. $60 million for indigenous peoples and Afro-Colombian empowerment in Central America. $60 million. $8 million for making mice transgender. This is real. $32 million for a left-wing propaganda operation in Moldova. $10 million for male circumcision in Mozambique. $20 million for the Arab Sesame Street in the Middle East. It's a program. $20 million for a program. $1.9 billion to recently created Decarbonization of Homes Committee, headed up, and we know she's involved. Just at the last moment, the money was passed over by a woman named Stacey Abrams. Have you ever heard of her? A $3.5 million consulting contract for lavish fish monitoring. $1.5 million for voter confidence in Liberia. $14 million for social cohesion in Mali. $59 million for illegal alien hotel rooms in New York City. He's a real estate developer. He's done very well. $250,000 to increase vegan local climate action innovation in Zambia. $42 million for social and behavior change in Uganda. $14 million for improving public procurement in Serbia. $47 million for improving learning outcomes in Asia. Asia's doing very well with learning. We know what we're doing. Should use it ourselves. And $101 million for DEI contracts at the Department of Education, the most ever paid, nothing even like it. Under the Trump administration, all of these scams, and they're far worse, but I didn't think it was appropriate to talk about them. They're so bad. Many more have been found out and exposed and swiftly terminated by a group of very intelligent, mostly young people, headed up by Elon, and we appreciate it. We found hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud. And we've taken back the money and reduced our debt to fight inflation and other things. Taking back a lot of that money. We got it just in time. This is just the beginning. The Government Accountability Office, a federal government office, has estimated annual fraud of over $500 billion in our nation, and we are working very hard to stop it. We're going to. We're also identifying shocking levels of incompetence and probable fraud in the Social Security program for our seniors, and that our seniors and people that we love rely on. Believe it or not, government databases list 4.7 million Social Security members from people aged 100 to 109 years old. It lists 3.6 million people from ages 110 to 119. I don't know any of them. I know some people that are rather elderly, but not quite that elderly. 3.47 million people from ages 120 to 129. 3.9 million people from ages 130 to 139. 3.5 million people from ages 140 to 149. And money is being paid to many of them. And we're searching right now. In fact, Pam, good luck. Good luck. You're going to find it. But a lot of money is paid out to people because it just keeps getting paid, and nobody does. And it really hurts Social Security and hurts our country. 1.3 million people from ages 150 to 159, and over 130,000 people, according to the Social Security databases, are age over 160 years old. We have a healthier country than I thought, Bobby. Including, to finish, 1,039 people between the ages of 220 and 229, one person between the age of 240 and 249, and one person is listed at 360 years of age. More than 100 years older than our country. But we're going to find out where that money's going, and it's not going to be pretty. By slashing all of the fraud, waste, and theft we can find, we will defeat inflation, bring down mortgage rates, lower car payments and grocery prices, protect our seniors, and put more money in the pockets of American families. And today, interest rates took a beautiful drop, big, beautiful drop. It's about time. And in the near future, I want to do what has not been done in 24 years, balance the federal budget. We're going to balance it. With that goal in mind, we have developed in great detail what we are calling the Gold Card, which goes on sale very, very soon. For $5 million, we will allow the most successful job-creating people from all over the world to buy a path to U.S. citizenship. It's like the green card, but better and more sophisticated. And these people will have to pay tax in our country. They won't have to pay tax from where they came. The money that they've made, you wouldn't want to do that, but they have to pay tax, create jobs. They'll also be taking people out of colleges and paying for them so that we can keep them in our country instead of having them being forced out. Number one, at the top school, as an example, being forced out and not being allowed to stay and create tremendous numbers of jobs and great success for a company out there. So while we take out the criminals, killers, traffickers, and child predators who are allowed to enter our country under the open border policy of these people, the Democrats, the Biden administration, the open border insane policies that you've allowed to destroy our country, we will now bring in brilliant, hardworking, job-creating people. They're going to pay a lot of money, and we're going to reduce our debt with that money. Americans have given us a mandate for bold and profound change. For nearly 100 years, the federal bureaucracy has grown until it has crushed our freedoms, ballooned our deficits, and held back America's potential in every possible way. The nation founded by pioneers and risk takers now drowns under millions and millions of pages of regulations and debt. Approvals that should take 10 days to get instead take 10 years, 15 years, and even 20 years before you're rejected. Meanwhile, we have hundreds of thousands of federal workers who have not been showing up to work. My administration will reclaim power from this unaccountable bureaucracy, and we will restore true democracy to America again. And any federal bureaucrat who resists this change will be removed from office immediately. Because we are draining the swamp. It's very simple. And the days of rule by unelected bureaucrats are over. And the next phase of our plan to deliver the greatest economy in history is for this Congress to pass tax cuts for everybody. They're in there. They're waiting for you to vote. And I'm sure that the people on my right, I don't mean the Republican right, but my right here, I'm sure you're going to vote for those tax cuts, because otherwise I don't believe the people will ever vote you into office. So I'm doing you a big favor by telling you that. But I know this group is going to be voting for the tax. Thank you. It's a very, very big part of our plan. We had tremendous success in our first term with it. A very big part of our plan. We're seeking permanent income tax cuts all across the board. And to get urgently needed relief to Americans hit especially hard by inflation, I'm calling for no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security benefits for our great seniors. And I also want to make interest payments on car loans tax deductible, but only if the car is made in America. And by the way, we're going to have growth in the auto industry like nobody's ever seen. Plants are opening up all over the place. Deals are being made. Never seen. That's a combination of the election win and tariffs. It's a beautiful word, isn't it? That, along with our other policies, will allow our auto industry to absolutely boom. It's going to boom. Spoke to the majors today, all three, the top people, and they're so excited. In fact, already numerous car companies have announced that they will be building massive automobile plants in America, with Honda just announcing a new plant in Indiana, one of the largest anywhere in the world. And this has taken place since our great victory on November 5th, a date which will hopefully go down as one of the most important in the history of our country. In addition, as part of our tax cuts, we want to cut taxes on domestic production and all manufacturing. And just as we did before, we will provide 100% expensing. It will be retroactive to January 20th, 2025. And it was one of the main reasons why our tax cuts were so successful in our first term, giving us the most successful economy in the history of our country, first term. We had a great first term. If you don't make your product in America, however, under the Trump administration, you will pay a tariff, and in some cases, a rather large one. Other countries have used tariffs against us for decades, and now it's our turn to start using them against those other countries. On average, the European Union, China, Brazil, India, Mexico, and Canada, have you heard of them? And countless other nations charge us tremendously higher tariffs than we charge them. It's very unfair. India charges us auto tariffs higher than 100%. China's average tariff on our products is twice what we charge them. And South Korea's average tariff is 4 times higher. Think of that, 4 times higher. And we give so much help militarily and in so many other ways to South Korea. But that's what happens. This is happening by friend and foe. This system is not fair to the United States and never was. And so on April 2nd, I wanted to make it April 1st, but I didn't want to be accused of April Fool's Day. That's not, just one day cost us a lot of money. But we're going to do it in April. I'm a very superstitious person. April 2nd, reciprocal tariffs kick in. And whatever they tariff us, other countries, we will tariff them. That's reciprocal, back and forth. Whatever they tax us, we will tax them. If they do non-monetary tariffs to keep us out of their market, then we will do non-monetary barriers to keep them out of our market. There's a lot of that, too. They don't even allow us in their market. We will take in trillions and trillions of dollars and create jobs like we have never seen before. I did it with China, and I did it with others, and the Biden administration couldn't do anything about it because there was so much money they couldn't do anything about it. We have been ripped off for decades by nearly every country on earth, and we will not let that happen any longer. Much has been said over the last 3 months about Mexico and Canada, but we have very large deficits with both of them. But even more importantly, they've allowed fentanyl to come into our country at levels never seen before, killing hundreds of thousands of our citizens and many very young, beautiful people, destroying families. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. They are, in effect, receiving subsidies of hundreds of billions of dollars. We pay subsidies to Canada and to Mexico of hundreds of billions of dollars, and the United States will not be doing that any longer. We're not going to do it any longer. Thanks to our America First policies we're putting into place, we have had $1.7 trillion of new investment in America in just the past few weeks. The combination of the election and our economic policies that people of SoftBank, one of the most brilliant anywhere in the world, announced a $200 billion investment. OpenAI and Oracle, Larry Ellison, announced $500 billion investment, which they wouldn't have done if Kamala had won. Apple announced $500 billion investment. Tim Cook called me. He said, I cannot spend it fast enough. It's going to be much higher than that, I believe. They'll be building their plants here instead of in China. And just yesterday, Taiwan Semiconductor, the biggest in the world, most powerful in the world, has a tremendous amount, 97% of the market, announced a $165 billion investment to build the most powerful chips on earth right here in the USA. And we're not giving them any money. Your CHIPS Act is a horrible, horrible thing. We give hundreds of billions of dollars, and it doesn't mean a thing. They take our money and they don't spend it. All that meant to them, we're giving them no money. All that was important to them was they didn't want to pay the tariffs, so they came and they're building, and many other companies are coming. We don't have to give them money. We just want to protect our businesses and our people, and they will come because they won't have to pay tariffs if they build in America. So it's very amazing. You should get rid of the CHIP Act, and whatever's left over, Mr. Speaker, you should use it to reduce debt or any other reason you want to. Our new trade policy will also be great for the American farmer. I love the farmer. Who will now be selling into our home market, the USA, because nobody is going to be able to compete with you. Because there's goods that come in from other countries and companies, they're really in a bad position in so many different ways. They're uninspected. They may be very dirty and disgusting, and they come in and they pour in, and they hurt our American farmers. The tariffs will go on agricultural product coming into America, and our farmers, starting on April 2nd, it may be a little bit of an adjustment period. We had that before when I made the deal with China, $50 billion of purchases, and I said, just bear with me, and they did. They did. Probably have to bear with me again, and this will be even better. That was great. The problem with it was that Biden didn't enforce it. He didn't enforce it. $50 billion of purchases, and we were doing great, but Biden did not enforce it, and it hurt our farmers. But our farmers are going to have a field day right now. So to our farmers, have a lot of fun. I love you too. I love you too. It's all going to happen. And I have also imposed a 25% tariff on foreign aluminum, copper, lumber, and steel, because if we don't have, as an example, steel and lots of other things, we don't have a military, and frankly, we just won't have a country very long. Here today is a proud American steelworker, fantastic person from Decatur, Alabama, Jeff Denard. Has been working at the same steel plant for 27 years in a job that has allowed him to serve as the captain of his local volunteer fire department, raise 7 children with his beautiful wife, Nicole, and over the years provide a loving home for more than 40 foster children. So great, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. Stories like Jeff's remind us that tariffs are not just about protecting American jobs. They're about protecting the soul of our country. Tariffs are about making America rich again and making America great again, and it's happening, and it will happen rather quickly. There'll be a little disturbance, but we're okay with that. It won't be much. No, you're not. Oh. And look where Biden took us, very low, the lowest we've ever been. Jeff, I want to thank you very much. And I also want to recognize another person who has devoted herself to foster care community. She works so hard on it. A very loving person, our magnificent First Lady of the United States. Melania's work has yielded incredible results, helping prepare our nation's future leaders as they enter the workforce. Our First Lady is joined by 2 impressive young women, very impressive. Haley Ferguson, who benefited from the First Lady's Fostering the Future initiative and is poised to complete her education and become a teacher. And Elliston Berry, who became a victim of an illicit deepfake image produced by a peer. with Elliston's help, the Senate just passed the Take It Down Act, and this is so important. Thank you very much, John. John Thune, thank you. Stand up, John. Thank you, John. Thank you all very much. Thank you. And thank you to John Thune and the Senate. Great job. To criminalize the publication of such images online is a terrible, terrible thing. And once it passes the House, I look forward to signing that bill into law. Thank you. And I'm going to use that bill for myself, too, if you don't mind. Because nobody gets treated worse than I do online. Nobody. That's great. Thank you very much to the Senate. Thank you. But if we truly care about protecting Americans' children, no step is more crucial than securing America's borders. Over the past 4 years, 21 million people poured into the United States. Many of them were murderers, human traffickers, gang members, and other criminals from the streets of dangerous cities all throughout the world. Because of Joe Biden's insane and very dangerous open border policies, they are now strongly embedded in our country, but we are getting them out and getting them out fast. And I want to thank Tom Homan and Christy. I want to thank you and Paul of Border Patrol. I want to thank you. What a job they've all done, everybody. Border Patrol, ICE, law enforcement in general is incredible. We have to take care of our law enforcement. Have to. Last year, a brilliant 22-year-old nursing student named Laken Riley, the best in her class, admired by everybody, went out for a jog on the campus of the University of Georgia. That morning, Laken was viciously attacked, assaulted, beaten, brutalized, and horrifically murdered. Laken was stolen from us by a savage illegal alien gang member who was arrested while trespassing across Biden's open southern border and then set loose into the United States under the heartless policies of that failed administration. It was indeed a failed administration. He had then been arrested and released in a Democrat-run sanctuary city, a disaster, before ending the life of this beautiful young angel. With us this evening are Laken's beloved mother, Allison, and her sister, Lauren. Last year, I told Laken's grieving parents that we would ensure their daughter would not have died in vain. That's why the very first bill I signed into law as your 47th president mandates the detention of all dangerous criminal aliens who threaten public safety. It's a very strong, powerful act. It's called the Laken-Riley Act. So Allison and Lauren, America will never, ever forget our beautiful Laken Hope Riley. Thank you very much. Since taking office, my administration has launched the most sweeping border and immigration crackdown in American history, and we quickly achieved the lowest numbers of illegal border crossers ever recorded. Thank you. The media and our friends in the Democrat Party kept saying we needed new legislation. We must have legislation to secure the border. But it turned out that all we really needed was a new president. Thank you. Joe Biden didn't just open our borders, he flew illegal aliens over them to overwhelm our schools, hospitals, and communities throughout the country. Entire towns like Aurora, Colorado, and Springfield, Ohio, buckled under the weight of the migrant occupation and corruption like nobody's ever seen before. Beautiful towns destroyed. Now, just as I promised in my inaugural address, we are achieving the great liberation of America. But there still is much work to be done. Here tonight is a woman I have gotten to know, Alexis Nungari from Houston. Wonderful woman. Last June, Alexis's 12-year-old daughter, her precious Jocelyn, walked to a nearby convenience store. She was kidnapped, tied up, assaulted for 2 hours under a bridge, and horrifically murdered. Arrested and charged with this heinous crime are 2 illegal alien monsters from Venezuela, released into America by the last administration through their ridiculous open border. The death of this beautiful 12-year-old girl and the agony of her mother and family touched our entire nation greatly. Alexis, I promised that we would always remember your daughter, your magnificent daughter, and earlier tonight I signed an order keeping my word to you. One thing I have learned about Jocelyn is that she loved animals so much. She loved nature. Across Galveston Bay, from where Jocelyn lived in Houston, you will find a magnificent national wildlife refuge, a pristine, peaceful, 34,000-acre sanctuary for all of God's creatures on the edge of the Gulf of America. Alexis, moments ago, I formally renamed that refuge in loving memory of your beautiful daughter, Jocelyn. So, Mr. Vice President, if you would, may I have the order? Thank you very much. All 3 savages charged with Jocelyn and Lakin's murders were members of the Venezuelan prison gang, the toughest gang, they say, in the world, known as Tren de Aragua. 2 weeks ago, I officially designated this gang, along with MS-13 and the bloodthirsty Mexican drug cartels, as foreign terrorist organizations. They are now officially in the same category as ISIS, and that's not good for them. Countless thousands of these terrorists were welcomed into the U.S. by the Biden administration. But now every last one will be rounded up and forcibly removed from our country, or, if they're too dangerous, put in jails, standing trial in this country, because we don't want them to come back ever. With us this evening is a warrior on the front lines of that battle, Border Patrol Agent Roberto Ortiz. Great guy. In January, Roberto and another agent were patrolling by the Rio Grande near an area known as Cartel Island. Doesn't sound too nice to me. When heavily armed gunmen started shooting at them, Roberto saw that his partner was totally exposed, at great danger, and he leapt into action, returning fire and providing crucial seconds for his fellow agent to seek safety, just barely. I have some of the prints of that event, and it was not good. Agent Ortiz, we salute you for your great courage and for your line of fire that you took and for the bravery that you showed. We honor you, and we will always honor you. Thank you, Roberto, very much. Thank you, Roberto. And I actually got to know him on my many calls to the border. He's a great gentleman. The territory to the immediate south of our border is now dominated entirely by criminal cartels that murder, rape, torture, and exercise total control. They have total control over a whole nation, posing a grave threat to our national security. The cartels are waging war in America, and it's time for America to wage war on the cartels, which we are doing. Five nights ago, Mexican authorities, because of our tariff policies being imposed on them, think of this, handed over to us 29 of the biggest cartel leaders in their country. That has never happened before. They want to make us happy. First time ever. But we need Mexico and Canada to do much more than they've done, and they have to stop the fentanyl and drugs pouring into the USA. They're going to stop it. I have sent Congress a detailed funding request laying out exactly how we will eliminate these threats to protect our homeland and complete the largest deportation operation in American history, larger even than current record holder, President Dwight D. Eisenhower, a moderate man, but someone who believed very strongly in borders. Americans expect Congress to send me this funding without delay so I can sign it into law. So, Mr. Speaker, John Thune, both of you, I hope you're going to be able to do that, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Mr. Leader, thank you. Thank you very much. And let's get it to me. I'll sign it so fast, you won't even believe it. And as we reclaim our sovereignty, we must also bring back law and order to our cities and towns. In recent years, our justice system has been turned upside down by radical left lunatics. Many jurisdictions virtually ceased enforcing the law against dangerous repeat offenders while weaponizing law enforcement against political opponents like me. My administration has acted swiftly and decisively to restore fair, equal, and impartial justice under the constitutional rule of law, starting at the FBI and the DOJ, Pam, good luck. Cash, wherever you may be, good luck. Good luck. Pam Bondi, good luck. So important. Going to do a great job. Cash, thank you. Thank you, Cash. They've already started very strong. They're going to do a fantastic job. You're going to be very proud of them. We're also once again giving our police officers the support, protection, and respect they so dearly deserve. They have to get it. They have such a hard, dangerous job, but we're going to make it less dangerous. The problem is the bad guys don't respect the law, but they're starting to respect it, and they soon will respect it. This also includes our great fire departments throughout the country. Our firemen and women are unbelievable people, and we'll never forget them. And besides that, they voted for me in record numbers, so I have no choice. 1 year ago this month, 31-year-old New York police officer Jonathan Diller, unbelievably wonderful person and a great officer, was gunned down at a traffic stop on Long Island. I went to his funeral. The vicious criminal charged with his murder had 21 prior arrests, and they were rough arrests, too. He was a real bad one. The thug in the seat next to him had 14 prior arrests and went by the name of Killer. He was Killer. He killed other people, they say, a lot of them. I attended Officer Diller's service, and when I met his wife and one-year-old son, Ryan, it was very inspirational, actually. His widow's name is Stephanie, and she is here tonight. Stephanie, thank you very much, Stephanie. Thank you very much. Stephanie, we're going to make sure that Ryan knows his dad was a true hero, New York's finest, and we're going to get these cold-blooded killers and repeat offenders off our streets, and we're going to do it fast. Got to stop it. They get out with 28 arrests. They push people into subway trains. They hit people over the head, back of the head with baseball bats. We got to get them out of here. I've already signed an executive order requiring a mandatory death penalty for anyone who murders a police officer, and tonight I'm asking Congress to pass that policy into permanent law. I'm also asking for a new crime bill getting tough on repeat offenders while enhancing protections for America's police officers so they can do their jobs without fear of their lives being totally destroyed. They don't want to be killed. We're not going to let them be killed. Joining us in the gallery tonight is a young man who truly loves our police. His name is DJ Daniel. He is 13 years old, and he has always dreamed of becoming a police officer. But in 2018, DJ was diagnosed with brain cancer. The doctors gave him 5 months at most to live. That was more than 6 years ago. Since that time, DJ and his dad have been on a quest to make his dream come true, and DJ has been sworn in as an honorary law enforcement officer actually a number of times. The police love him. The police departments love him. And tonight, DJ, we're going to do you the biggest honor of them all. I am asking our new Secret Service Director, Sean Curran, to officially make you an agent of the United States Secret Service. Thank you, DJ. DJ's doctors believe his cancer likely came from a chemical he was exposed to when he was younger. Since 1975, rates of child cancer have increased by more than 40%. Reversing this trend is one of the top priorities for our new presidential commission to make America healthy again, chaired by our new Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy, Jr. With the name Kennedy, you would have thought everybody over here would have been cheering. How quickly they forget. Our goal is to get toxins out of our environment, poisons out of our food supply, and keep our children healthy and strong. As an example, not long ago, and you can't even believe these numbers, 1 in 10,000 children had autism, 1 in 10,000. And now it's 1 in 36. There's something wrong. 1 in 36. Think of that. So we're going to find out what it is, and there's nobody better than Bobby and all of the people that are working with you. You have the best to figure out what is going on. Okay, Bobby? Good luck. It's a very important job. Thank you. Thank you. My administration is also working to protect our children from toxic ideologies in our schools. A few years ago, January, Littlejohn and her husband discovered that their daughter's school had secretly socially transitioned their 13-year-old little girl. Teachers and administrators conspired to deceive January and her husband while encouraging her daughter to use a new name and pronouns. They, them pronoun, actually, all without telling January, who is here tonight and is now a courageous advocate against this form of child abuse. January, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Stories like this are why, shortly after taking office, I signed an executive order banning public schools from indoctrinating our children with transgender ideology. I also signed an order to cut off all taxpayer funding to any institution that engages in the sexual mutilation of our youth. And now I want Congress to pass a bill permanently banning and criminalizing sex changes on children and forever ending the lie that any child is trapped in the wrong body. This is a big lie. And our message to every child in America is that you are perfect exactly the way God made you. Because we're getting wokeness out of our schools and out of our military, and it's already out, and it's out of our society. We don't want it. Wokeness is trouble. Wokeness is bad. It's gone. It's gone. And we feel so much better for it, don't we? Don't we feel better? Our service members won't be activists and ideologues. They will be fighters and warriors. They will fight for our country. And Pete, congratulations. Secretary of Defense, congratulations. And he's not big into the woke movement, I can tell you. I know him well. I am pleased to report that in January, the U.S. Army had its single best recruiting month in 15 years, and that all armed services are having among the best recruiting results ever in the history of our services. What a difference. And you know, it was just a few months ago where the results were exactly the opposite. We couldn't recruit anywhere. We couldn't recruit. Now we're having the best results just about that we've ever had. What a tremendous turnaround. It's really a beautiful thing to see. People love our country again. It's very simple. They love our country, and they love being in our military again. So it's a great thing, and thank you very much. Great job. Thank you. We're joined tonight by a young man, Jason Hartley, who knows the weight of that call of duty. Jason's father, grandfather, and great-grandfather all wore the uniform. Jason tragically lost his dad, who was also a Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputy when he was just a boy, and now he wants to carry on the family legacy of service. Jason is a senior in high school, a six-letter varsity athlete, a really good athlete, they say, a brilliant student with a 4.46, that's good, GPA. And his greatest dream is to attend the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. And Jason, that's a very big deal getting in. That's a hard one to get into. But I'm pleased to inform you that your application has been accepted. You will soon be joining the Corps of Cadets. Thank you. Jason, you're going to be on the long gray line, Jason. As Commander-in-Chief, my focus is on building the most powerful military of the future. As a first step, I'm asking Congress to fund a state-of-the-art Golden Dome missile defense shield to protect our homeland, all made in the USA. And Ronald Reagan wanted to do it long ago, but the technology just wasn't there, not even close. But now we have the technology. It's incredible, actually. And other places, they have it. Israel has it. Other places have it. And the United States should have it too, right, Tim, right? They should have it too. So I want to thank you. But it's a very, very important. This is a very dangerous world. We should have it. We want to be protected, and we're going to protect our citizens like never before. To boost our defense industrial base, we are also going to resurrect the American shipbuilding industry, including commercial shipbuilding and military shipbuilding. And for that purpose, I am announcing tonight that we will create a new Office of Shipbuilding in the White House and offer special tax incentives to bring this industry home to America where it belongs. We used to make so many ships. We don't make them anymore very much, but we're going to make them very fast, very soon. It will have a huge impact. To further enhance our national security, my administration will be reclaiming the Panama Canal, and we've already started doing it. Just today, a large American company announced they are buying both ports around the Panama Canal and lots of other things having to do with the Panama Canal and a couple of other canals. The Panama Canal was built by Americans for Americans, not for others, but others could use it. But it was built at tremendous cost of American blood and treasure. 38,000 workers died building the Panama Canal. They died of malaria. They died of snake bites and mosquitoes. Not a nice place to work. They paid them very highly to go there, knowing there was a 25% chance that they would die. The most expensive project also that was ever built in our country's history, if you bring it up to modern day costs. It was given away by the Carter administration for $1. But that agreement has been violated very severely. We didn't give it to China. We gave it to Panama, and we're taking it back. And we have Marco Rubio in charge. Good luck, Marco. Now, we know who to blame if anything goes wrong. Marco's been amazing, and he's going to do a great job. Think of it. He got 100 votes. You know, he was approved with actually 99, but the 100th was this gentleman, and I feel very certain. So let's assume he got 100 votes, and I'm either very, very happy about that or I'm very concerned about it. But he's already proven. I mean, he's a great gentleman. He's respected by everybody, and we appreciate you voting for Marco. He's going to do a fantastic job. Thank you. Thank you. He's doing a great job. Great job. And I also have a message tonight for the incredible people of Greenland. We strongly support your right to determine your own future. And if you choose, we welcome you into the United States of America. We need Greenland for national security and even international security, and we're working with everybody involved to try and get it. But we need it really for international world security, and I think we're going to get it. One way or the other, we're going to get it. We will keep you safe. We will make you rich, and together we will take Greenland to heights like you have never thought possible before. It's a very small population, but very, very large piece of land and very, very important for military security. America is once again standing strong against the forces of radical Islamic terrorism. 3.5 years ago, ISIS terrorists killed 13 American service members and countless others in the Abbey Gate bombing during the disastrous and incompetent withdrawal from Afghanistan. Not that they were withdrawing, it was the way they withdrew. Perhaps the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. Tonight, I am pleased to announce that we have just apprehended the top terrorist responsible for that atrocity, and he is right now on his way here to face the swift sword of American justice. And I want to thank especially the government of Pakistan for helping arrest this monster. This was a very momentous day for those 13 families who I actually got to know very well, most of them, whose children were murdered, and the many people that were so badly, over 42 people, so badly injured on that fateful day in Afghanistan. What a horrible day. Such incompetence was shown that when Putin saw what happened, I guess he said, wow, maybe this is my chance. That's how bad it was. Should have never happened. Grossly incompetent people. I spoke to many of the parents and loved ones, and they're all in our hearts tonight. Just spoke to them on the phone. We had a big call. Every one of them called, and everybody was on the line, and they did nothing but cry with happiness. They were very happy, as happy as you can be under those circumstances. Their child, brother, sister, son, daughter was killed for no reason whatsoever. In the Middle East, we're bringing back our hostages from Gaza. In my first term, we achieved one of the most groundbreaking peace agreements in generations, the Abraham Accords. And now we're going to build on that foundation to create a more peaceful and prosperous future for the entire region. A lot of things are happening in the Middle East. People have been talking about that so much lately with everything going on with Ukraine and Russia. But a lot of things are happening in the Middle East. It's a rough neighborhood, actually. I'm also working tirelessly to end the savage conflict in Ukraine. Millions of Ukrainians and Russians have been needlessly killed or wounded in this horrific and brutal conflict with no end in sight. The United States has sent hundreds of billions of dollars to support Ukraine's defense with no security, with no anything. Do you want to keep it going for another 5 years? Yeah, you would say Pocahontas says yes. $2,000 people are being killed every single week. More than that. They're Russian young people. They're Ukrainian young people. They're not Americans. But I want it to stop. Meanwhile, Europe has sadly spent more money buying Russian oil and gas than they have spent on defending Ukraine, by far. Think of that. They've spent more buying Russian oil and gas than they have defending. And we've spent perhaps $350 billion, like taking candy from a baby. That's what happened. And they've spent $100 billion. What a difference that is. And we have an ocean separating us, and they don't. But we're getting along very well with them, and lots of good things are happening. Biden has authorized more money in this fight than Europe has spent by billions and billions of dollars. It's hard to believe that they wouldn't have stopped it and said at some point, come on, let's equalize. You got to be equal to us. But that didn't happen. Earlier today, I received an important letter from President Zelensky of Ukraine. The letter reads, Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible. to bring lasting peace closer. Nobody wants peace more than the Ukrainians, he said. My team and I stand ready to work under President Trump's strong leadership to get a peace that lasts. We do really value how much America has done to help Ukraine maintain its sovereignty and independence. Regarding the agreement on minerals and security, Ukraine is ready to sign it at any time that is convenient for you. I appreciate that he sent this letter, just got it a little while ago. Simultaneously, we've had serious discussions with Russia and have received strong signals that they are ready for peace. Wouldn't that be beautiful? Wouldn't that be beautiful? Wouldn't that be beautiful? It's time to stop this madness. It's time to halt the killing. It's time to end this senseless war. If you want to end wars, you have to talk to both sides. Nearly 4 years ago, amid rising tensions, a history teacher named Mark Fogel was detained in Russia and sentenced to 14 years in a penal colony. Rough stuff. The previous administration barely lifted a finger to help him. They knew he was innocent, but they had no idea where to begin. But last summer, I promised his 95-year-old mother, Malphine, that we would bring her boy safely back home. After 22 days in office, I did just that, and they are here tonight. To Mark and his great mom, we are delighted to have you safe and sound and with us. As fate would have it, Mark Fogel was born in a small rural town in Butler, Pennsylvania. Have you heard of it? Where his mother has lived for the past 78 years. I just happened to go there last July 13th for a rally. That was not pleasant. And that is where I met his beautiful mom right before I walked onto that stage. And I told her I would not forget what she said about her son. And I never did I? Never forgot. Less than 10 minutes later, at that same rally, gunfire rang out, and a sick and deranged assassin unloaded 8 bullets from his sniper's perch into a crowd of many thousands of people. My life was saved by a fraction of an inch, but some were not so lucky. Corey Comparator was a firefighter, a veteran, a Christian, a husband, a devoted father, and above all, a protector. When the sound of gunshots pierced the air, it was a horrible sound. Corey knew instantly what it was and what to do. He threw himself on top of his wife and daughters and shielded them from the bullets with his own body. Corey was hit really hard. You know the story from there. He sacrificed his life to save theirs. 2 others, very fine people, were also seriously hit. But thankfully, with the help of 2 great country doctors, we thought they were gone, and they were saved. So those doctors had great talent. We're joined by Corey's wife, Helen, who was his high school sweetheart, and their 2 beloved daughters, Allison and Kaylee. Thank you. To Helen, Allison, and Kaylee, Corey is looking down on his three beautiful ladies right now, and he is cheering you on. He loves you. He is cheering you on. Corey was taken from us much too soon, but his destiny was to leave us all with a shining example of the selfless devotion of a true American patriot. It was love like Corey's that built our country, and it's love like Corey's that is going to make our country more majestic than ever before. I believe that my life was saved that day in Butler for a very good reason. I was saved by God to make America great again. I believe that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. From the patriots of Lexington and Concord to the heroes of Gettysburg and Normandy, from the warriors who crossed the Delaware to the trailblazers who climbed the Rockies, and from the legends who soared at Kitty Hawk to the astronauts who touched the moon, Americans have always been the people who defied all odds, transcended all dangers, made the most extraordinary sacrifices, and did whatever it took to defend our children, our country, and our freedom. And as we have seen in this chamber tonight, that same strength, faith, love, and spirit is still alive and thriving in the hearts of the American people. Despite the best efforts of those who would try to censor us, silence us, break us, destroy us, Americans are today a proud, free, sovereign, and independent nation that will always be free, and we will fight for it till death. We will never let anything happen to our beloved country, because we are a country of doers, dreamers, fighters, and survivors. Our ancestors crossed a vast ocean, strode into the unknown wilderness, and carved their fortunes from the rock and soil of a perilous and very dangerous frontier. They chased our destiny across a boundless continent. They built the railroads, laid the highways, and graced the world with American marvels like the Empire State Building, the mighty Hoover Dam, and the towering Golden Gate Bridge. They lit the world with electricity, broke free of the force of gravity, fired up the engines of American industry, and vanquished the communists, fascists, and Marxists all over the world, and gave us countless modern wonders sculptured out of iron, glass, and steel. We stand on the shoulders of these pioneers who won and built the modern age, these workers who poured their sweat into the skylines of our cities, these warriors who shed their blood on fields of battle and gave everything they had for our rights and for our freedom. Now it is our time to take up the righteous cause of American liberty, and it is our turn to take America's destiny into our own hands and begin the most thrilling days in the history of our country. This will be our greatest era. With God's help, over the next 4 years, we are going to lead this nation even higher, and we are going to forge the freest, most advanced, most dynamic, and most dominant civilization ever to exist on the face of this earth. We are going to create the highest quality of life, build the safest and wealthiest and healthiest and most vital communities anywhere in the world. We are going to conquer the vast frontiers of science, and we are going to lead humanity into space and plant the American flag on the planet Mars and even far beyond. And through it all, we are going to rediscover the unstoppable power of the American spirit. And we are going to renew unlimited promise of the American dream Every single day we will stand up and we will fight, fight, fight for the country our citizens believe in and for the country our people deserve. My fellow Americans, get ready for an incredible future because the golden age of America has only just begun. It will be like nothing that has ever been seen before. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.
President Donald Trump speaking to a joint session of Congress for almost exactly 100 minutes. As seen and heard live on Bloomberg television and radio, I'm Kaylee Lyons alongside Joe Matthew in Washington, where, of course, we just heard President Trump covering a lot of ground. And the first time he has given an address like this in the House chamber in 5 years. He is still standing at the rostrum, Joe, soaking it all in as we still hear the applause from those who are gathered, and he will begin making his way out of the chamber, certainly expected to be greeting members of the body as he goes.
Much like we saw on the way in, the White House did schedule the president to be in the chamber till about 11:20 p.m. Eastern time, so he's got some talking likely to do here as the Sergeant-at-Arms of the U.S. House, William McFarland, guides him out of the rostrum. If you're with us on Bloomberg TV and on YouTube, you see the glad handing already begin with members of the military. Kaylee, when we consider the news that was made tonight, and we can spend some time fact-checking some of the stuff that we heard from the president, only a couple of real headlines that would be justified for our audience here with some of the issues that we were talking about. One of them, of course, tariffs when it comes to Canada and Mexico. It appears that the Commerce Secretary's remarks, Kaylee, earlier were not accurate. These tariffs, at least from what we heard from the president, will not be rescinded tomorrow. And then the CHIPS Act. A redhead on the terminal about halfway through the speech. We're not going to give chip makers any money from the CHIPS Act. He said you should get rid of the CHIPS Act, Mr. Speaker. You should use the money to reduce the debt.
And, of course, that was not his only ask of the Speaker or the other members of Congress who were gathered. He was pitching them on tax cuts that he would like to see implemented or at least extended through legislation, as well as funding for the border, something he touched on a lot. Both of those issues speaking to the mandate with which he believes he was elected in November for focusing on the economy and on immigration. We certainly heard a lot of that tonight as we see the president shaking hands with members on the floor. If you're with us on Bloomberg TV and on radio, of course, we are expecting that this will last for some time as we consider, Joe, and you mentioned the notion here of all of the different things that we could talk about that we heard from the president. Many of it, of course, things we've heard from him repeatedly over the course of his 6 weeks in office thus far.
That's for sure. Quite the scrum there on the floor of the House as he tries to make his way through the lawmakers. And our signature panel is with us right now. They were watching and listening along with you. Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis, partner at Stone Court Capital, our Republican strategist, alongside Democratic analyst Jeannie Sheehan Zaino, senior democracy fellow at the Center for the Study of the Presidency and Congress. An hour and 45 minutes. Rick, how did he do?
Yeah, I think that, he made his case to the American people that his administration's on track and that he's accomplished more in a very short time that he's been in office than any other presidency in history, including, I would say, the comparisons he was making to George Washington. So he went back to the founding of our nation and graded himself successful. I do think it was a chippy speech. I mean, he came in loaded for bear. Democrats also loaded for bear, caused quite a ruckus at the very beginning, something I've never seen the likes of in this kind of a dignified procession. And so it'll be interesting to see how much is reported on the inside the hall activity, protests, things that were going on that I think took a little bit from the chamber tonight. But he got through it all, and I think, he will look at this as a successful night in his administration.
Well, Jeannie, what Rick, of course, is alluding to is just 3 minutes into the president's remarks, Congressman Al Green, the Democrat from Texas, yelling and raising his cane, saying you have no mandate to cut Medicaid. He was actually escorted escorted out of the chamber, removed from the chamber by the sergeant at arms. That was not the only time we saw Democrats interject. There was also a chance of lie when the president was talking specifically about the efforts of DOJ, that they're finding hundreds of billions of dollars in fraud, citing what he said are different age groups that are receiving Social Security checks well into the hundreds. Obviously, that is not factually accurate. Those people may still be on the rolls, but that doesn't mean that they're receiving benefits. But what did you make of the response he was able to elicit at times from the other side of the aisle?
Well, it is not what the Democratic leadership wanted, and they were very, very clear about that. And, you know, Al Green, I think, was the first, and then there were many. We even saw Rashida Tlaib. She was responding in real time with a whiteboard. I've never seen anything like that. But the reality is that by the time the speech ended, many Democrats had already left the floor out of protest, you know, and the president engaged with them. We heard him use an unfortunate term to refer to the senator from Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren. And so it was a very, very contentious speech. And I think it speaks to how divided the American public is. And that is something we have seen. Anybody who thought the president was going to come in tonight and speak to all Americans was wrong. As Rick mentioned, he came in and one of the first things he said is he compared himself to our amazing founders and said he is a better president than even George Washington. And that, of course, elicited groans and boos from Democrats. So this is a president who is doubling down, as he always has, on his base. And, you know, even the remarks he made pertaining to things like tariffs, telling farmers, much to the dismay of even Republicans, that they would have fun, you know, as they battle with tariffs, which will make it very, very hard for them. Police officers, you know, he is going to, you know, think about and talk about supporting police officers. You heard Democrats yell back, what about January 6th? Because, of course, those police officers did not feel that they were treated well. So, you know, it was a very contentious speech from start to finish. There was even a Democrat who held up a speech that said, this is not normal, that was ripped down by a Republican. And it was not normal.
President Trump has made his way out of the House chamber now, and obviously he'll have a couple of folks to talk to on his way out of the building. Kaylee, he is scheduled to be there for a bit, and they do have a bit to talk about. But, Rick, I wonder, what will this be remembered for? The way it started, lawmakers actually being escorted from the room, the chanting and so forth, or some of the lines that Donald Trump managed to land?
No, I think the circus nature of it will be forgotten pretty quickly. Those things don't usually tend to lend a lasting impression. Look, I think we learned something important tonight, which was it sounds like the Ukraine relationship with the United States is been mended, and that we're going to start moving toward a more robust relationship with Ukraine again, and that there are conversations that Trump's having with Putin and the Russian side toward some kind of a ceasefire or peace plan. So to me, that is a big moving part. But I think anybody who says that Trump isn't serious about keeping these tariffs on is missing the whole speech tonight. To him, these were the soul of the country, these tariffs, and he's been preaching these for a long time. I think this is public policy. It's probably going to be priced in after tonight in a much longer term way than what it's been.
Yeah, he said with the tariffs, there may be a bit of an adjustment period for the farmers specifically, and then later said that there will be a little disturbance, but we're okay with that. I guess
short-term pain.
We'll see how much pain there is and if everybody really is okay with that. Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano, our signature panel, will be sticking with us. But right now we want to check back in with Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern, who is in Statuary Hall at the Capitol. And Anne-Marie, I would imagine people are now flooding out of the chamber and heading your way.
Absolutely. Flooding out of the chamber. Some Democratic senators we did see flood out a little bit earlier, like Senator Bernie Sanders, who left with there still being, about 30 minutes ago, when there was still some time left in this speech. I'd love to pick up on Rick's point there, though, about tariffs, because there was a little bit of nuance to what Trump said. Yes, 100% Trump believes you tax us, we tax you. He reiterated the timeline of when tariffs will be going on, especially April 2nd, when it comes to those reciprocal tariffs. But we heard earlier today from Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, who I'll be speaking to tomorrow morning, and he really opened the door for potentially some sort of deal, maybe bringing down the levy when it comes to Canada and Mexico. And Trump said something tonight that I think is being missed right now. He said he spoke to the heads of 3 major automakers today. We know that the automakers are the ones that, if they are USMCA compliant, they want to be a carve-out. So potentially there's room for tariffs maybe to stay on, but maybe the word exemptions is going to start to really percolate when it comes to how this administration is going to be talking about trade.
Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern live on Capitol Hill. We'll be checking back with Anne-Marie. Interesting, Rick, as we fold the panel back in here, to think that the Commerce Secretary stepped in front of the president today. Is that what happened?
Yeah, look, I mean, he got a lot of attention today with the press by making some comments that somehow within the next 24 hours there'd be something new to report on tariffs. And maybe that's true, right? We don't take for granted the fact that Donald Trump is the sole, policy expert when it comes to these tariffs, and he's going to make the decisions on them. But look, I think we're really talking around the edges. Tariffs are going to be a regime that Donald Trump uses to punish countries that don't do his bidding, to settle scores when it comes to trade, to equalize these reciprocal tariffs in order to equalize it and lower our trade deficits, and to take some pressure off American taxpayers, who he is intent on lowering the burden of taxes on them. So it is a comprehensive plan that I think, he reiterated today. And sure, these tariffs can go up and down, but there will be tariffs for the foreseeable future.
Well, and obviously, to your point, Rick, he sees this as feeding into the overall revenue picture as he's pursuing tax cuts. He said in this address, and we've heard this floated a few times now, Jeannie, this notion that we're going to balance the federal budget. The plans that Congress currently has laid out on spending and taxes do not, we should point out, call for a balanced budget right now. That is not actually on the table.
That is not on the table. Of course, we know Donald Trump added a lot to the debt in his first term, and with all the promises he's making about tax cuts, coupled with where we are at $36 trillion in debt, you're hard to imagine that they are going to get anywhere close to that. And this is where the numbers
Jeannie,
have
I'm
never
going to
added
interrupt
up.
you. I'm sorry. We're now getting the Democratic response from the junior senator from Michigan. Senator Alyssa Slotkin has just begun. Let's listen on Bloomberg TV and radio.
From the great state of Michigan, where I grew up. I've been in public service my entire life because I happened to be in New York City on 9/11 when the Twin Towers came down. Before the smoke cleared, I knew I wanted to make a life in national security. I was recruited by the CIA and did 3 tours in Iraq alongside the military. In between, I worked at the White House under President Bush and President Obama, 2 very different leaders who both believed that America is exceptional. You can find that same sense of patriotism here in Wyandotte, Michigan, where I'm speaking from tonight. It's a working-class town just south of Detroit. President Trump and I both won here in November. It might not seem like it, but plenty of places like this still exist across the United States. Places where people believe that if you work hard and play by the rules, you should do well and your kids should do better. It reminds me of how I grew up. My dad was a lifelong Republican, my mom a lifelong Democrat. But it was never a big deal because we had shared values that were bigger than any one party. We just went through another fraught election season. Americans made it clear that prices are too high and that the government needs to be more responsive to their needs. America wants change, but there's a responsible way to make change and a reckless way. And we can make that change without forgetting who we are as a country and as a democracy. So that's what I'm going to lay out tonight. Because whether you're from Wyandotte or Wichita, most Americans share 3 core beliefs: that the middle class is the engine of our country, that strong national security protects us from harm, and that our democracy, no matter how messy, is unparalleled and worth fighting for. Let's start with the economy. Michigan literally invented the middle class, the revolutionary idea that you could work at an auto plant and afford the car you were building. That's the American dream. And in order to expand and protect the middle class, we have to do a few basic things. We need to bring down the price of things we spend the most money on: groceries, housing, healthcare. We need to make more things in America with good-paying union jobs and bring our supply chains back home from places like China. We need to give American businesses the certainty they need to invest and create the jobs of the future. And we need a tax system that's fair for people who don't happen to make $1 billion. Look, the president talked a big game on the economy, but it's always important to read the fine print. So, do his plans actually help Americans get ahead? Not even close. President Trump is trying to deliver an unprecedented giveaway to his billionaire friends. He's on the hunt to find trillions of dollars to pass along to the wealthiest in America. And to do that, he's going to make you pay in every part of your life. Grocery and home prices are going up, not down, and he hasn't laid out a credible plan to deal with either of those. His tariffs on allies like Canada will raise prices on energy, lumber, and cars, and start a trade war that will hurt manufacturing and farmers. Your premiums and prescriptions will cost more because the math on his proposals doesn't work without going after your health care. Meanwhile, for those keeping score, the national debt is going up, not down. And if he's not careful, he could walk us right into a recession. And one more thing. In order to pay for his plan, he could very well come after your retirement, the Social Security, Medicare, and VA benefits you worked your whole life to earn. The president claims he won't, but Elon Musk just called Social Security the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time. While we're on the subject of Elon Musk, is there anyone in America who is comfortable with him and his gang of 20-year-olds using their own computer servers to poke through your tax returns, your health information, and your bank accounts? No oversight, no protections against cyber attack, no guardrails on what they do with your private data. We need a more efficient government. You want to cut waste? I'll help you do it. But change doesn't need to be chaotic or make us less safe. The mindless firing of people who work to protect our nuclear weapons, keep our planes from crashing, and conduct the research that finds the cure for cancer, only to rehire them 2 days later, no CEO in America could do that without being summarily fired. Okay, so we've talked about economic security. How about national security? Let's start with the border. As someone who spent my whole career protecting our homeland, every country deserves to know who and what is coming across its border. Period. Democrats and Republicans should all be for that. But securing the border without actually fixing our broken immigration system is dealing with the symptom and not the disease. America is a nation of immigrants. We need a functional system keyed to the needs of our economy that allows vetted people to come and work here legally. So I look forward to the president's plan on that. Because here's the thing. Today's world is deeply interconnected. Migration, cyber threats, AI, environmental destruction, terrorism. One nation cannot face these issues alone. We need friends in all corners, and our safety depends on it. President Trump loves to say peace through strength. That's actually a line he stole from Ronald Reagan. But let me tell you, after the spectacle that just took place in the Oval Office last week, Reagan must be rolling in his grave. We all want an end to the war in Ukraine, but Reagan understood that true strength required America to combine our military and economic might with moral clarity. And that scene in the Oval Office wasn't just a bad episode of reality TV. It summed up Trump's whole approach to the world. He believes in cozying up to dictators like Vladimir Putin and kicking our friends like the Canadians in the teeth. He sees American leadership as merely a series of real estate transactions. As a Cold War kid, I'm thankful it was Reagan and not Trump in office in the 1980s. Trump would have lost us the Cold War. Donald Trump's actions suggest that in his heart, he doesn't believe we're an exceptional nation. He clearly doesn't think we should lead the world. Look, America is not perfect, but I stand with the majority of Americans who believe we are still exceptional, unparalleled. And I would rather have American leadership over Chinese or Russian leadership any day of the week. Because for generations, America has offered something better. Our security and our prosperity, yes, but our democracy, our very system of government, has been the aspiration of the world. And right now, it's at risk. It's at risk when the president decides you can pick and choose what rules you want to follow, when he ignores court orders and the Constitution itself, or when elected leaders stand by and just let it happen. But it's also at risk when the president pits Americans against each other, when he demonizes those who are different and tells certain people they shouldn't be included. Because America is not just a patch of land between two oceans. We are more than that. Generations have fought and died to secure the fundamental rights that define us. Those rights and the fight for them make us who we are. We're a nation of strivers, risk-takers, innovators, and we are never satisfied. That is America's superpower. And look, I've lived and worked in many countries. I've seen democracies flicker out. I've seen what life is like when a government is rigged. You can't open a business without paying off a corrupt official. You can't criticize the guys in charge without getting a knock at the door in the middle of the night. So as much as we need to make our government more responsive to our lives today, don't for one moment fool yourself that democracy isn't precious and worth saving. But how do we actually do that? I know a lot of you have been asking that question. First, don't tune out. It's easy to be exhausted, but America needs you now more than ever. If previous generations had not fought for this democracy, where would we be today? Second, hold your elected officials, including me, accountable. Watch how they're voting. Go to town halls and demand they take action. That's as American as apple pie. Third, organize. Pick just one issue you're passionate about and engage. And doom scrolling doesn't count. Join a group that cares about your issue and act. And if you can't find one, start one. Some of the most important movements in our history have come from the bottom up. In closing, we all know that our country is going through something right now. We're not sure what the next day is going to hold, let alone the next decade. But this isn't the first time we've experienced significant and tumultuous change as a country. I'm a student of history, and we've gone through periods of political instability before. And ultimately, we've chosen to keep changing this country for the better. But every single time, we've only gotten through those moments because of two things: engaged citizens and principled leaders. Engaged citizens who do a little bit more than they're used to doing to fight for the things that they care about, and principled leaders who are ready to receive the ball and do something about it. So thank you tonight for caring about your country. Just by watching, you qualify as engaged citizens. And I promise that I and my fellow Democrats will do everything in our power to be the principled leaders that you deserve. Good night, everyone.
Democratic Senator Elissa Slotkin of Michigan in the formal Democratic response to President Trump's address to a joint session of Congress. As we bring you live coverage here, special coverage on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. I want to get back to Capitol Hill now, where Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern is surrounded by a sea of dignitaries and lawmakers who were at the speech earlier. Anne-Marie?
It's absolutely packed here, especially when it comes to the president's cabinet. They're his secretaries, and specifically given the fact that he made a lot of news this evening when it comes to things like tariffs and energy. That's why we're so lucky right now to be joined by Energy Secretary Chris Wright, an individual who made the move from the business sector. You were an engineer as well, spent your entire career in energy, and now you're going to be leading the president's policies. I want to pick up on one thing he said today. The president keeps talking about raw minerals. What in the United States do we have in terms of rare earths or critical minerals that we can actually start building and digging here?
Oh, we have tremendous mineral resources, or I should say underground minerals. To make them resources, you've got to be able to permit a mine and build the mine and develop it. So the United States is historically a big mining country, but in the last years, it's become very hard to permit new mines. But we have antimony, a key defense metal in this country that's not being mined today. We've got ability to expand our copper production, a key metal for industrial growth.
There's been a copper mine on hold in Arizona. What are the plans for that?
Exactly. And we'll dig into that one deeper. But that looks like a high-grade copper mine that should move forward. The Resolution mine, I believe it's called. So we have a ton of resources. Our country has just become a place where it's hard to do something and it's easy to stop something. So part of our goal in the Trump administration is to make it easier for businesses and entrepreneurs to develop resources in the United States, create jobs here in the United States, and therefore push prices down.
How long do you think it's going to take?
Mining has been historically very slow. The United States was recently ranked the second slowest country in the world to develop a mine. From finding a resource to developing a mine has averaged over 20 years. But there's projects further along that we want to nudge over the line and get into production.
I asked that question because the pendulum shifts so much, so that if you're an investor, potentially what happens in 4 years if you put money into a project like Keystone Pipeline and then it gets yanked with a new administration. How are you going to give the business community this confidence that they can invest and that investment is here to stay?
That is a great question. Some of the things we can do, like an energy department, we just stopped permitting new LNG export terminals in the last administration. We've immediately started that back. But other things, to your point, things that we need to change in law or in statute, they may take a little longer to happen, but we want to make some permanent changes. So the United States is a desired place to invest in again, as we have been historically. But I think you've seen in this president's first 45 days announcements of enormous size investments coming to this country. So I think the feel of a different business climate, the feel of the return of common sense is there, but we do have to put more of this actually in the law so it's long lasting.
We saw OPEC Plus say they're going to add more barrels to the market. They've been on hiatus with this for about 2 years. At the same time, President Trump's Treasury Secretary talks about the United States adding 3 million more barrels. What's the price that's acceptable for consumers, but also enough for drillers to want to make sure that they're drilling again?
So dependent upon costs. Historically, maybe that's been $70 to $80 the last 4 years. But I think with the Trump administration, it's going to become easier and less risky to get permits. The cost to do business is going to go down. So I think
even with tariffs?
I think so. Absolutely. The tariffs right now are on the margin to push investment into the United States, to make more materials and more support in the United States. But I think you're going to see break-even costs become lower in the United States, and we should see a drift downward in oil prices, as we've seen in the last 2 months.
Do you have a price?
I can't predict the future, or I'd be an oil trader. But what we want is lower prices for oil, lower prices for gasoline and diesel, electricity and home heating, all of those. We want to increase supply and therefore drive down price.
Energy Secretary Chris Wright, thank you so much for your time. That was, of course, the new Energy Secretary, Chris Wright, repeating what we hear a lot from this president, lower energy prices.
Drill, baby, drill. Got a big applause in the chamber this evening. Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern, thank you so much. We'll check back in with her in just a moment, but we return first to our signature panel and Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis and Jeannie Shan Zaino. Jeannie, I want to get your reaction quickly while we can to Senator Alyssa Slotkin's response that we just heard. Anne-Marie was talking to the Energy Secretary there about tariffs. Senator Slotkin says a trade war will hurt manufacturing and farmers. If he's not careful, speaking of the president, he could walk us right into a recession. Did she have the right message?
I think she did. I mean, her broad message overall on the economy and security was that there is a right way to make change, and she said change is needed, and there's a reckless way to do it. And she said Donald Trump is veering on the reckless end of that. And she gave as an example, Elon Musk talking about the fact that Social Security is the greatest Ponzi scheme. That was just a reminder to what she says is the reckless way in which Trump, both on the economy and on national security, is pursuing these policies. So it's a tough speech to give, but I thought her tone, particularly in contrast to Donald Trump's, was right on.
What did you think of this? A typically thankless job, if not a humiliating one, to deliver the party response. Democrats chose to make it clean, no kitchen tables, just a bunch of American flags, play it straight to the camera. Did she deliver the message?
Yeah, I think she delivered a Republican message. I mean, which side is she on? I mean, She's talking about Ronald Reagan. She's talking about national debt. She's, I mean, like a very, very centrist message for Democrats, and a very, very similar message you'd hear from a mainstream Republican who would be giving a speech like that after a Democratic president would have come to the chamber. I mean, I don't think she made any mistakes. There's a lot that I think a lot of voters are going to like about that. But she is way to the right of her party. I mean, while she's giving that speech, you have Bernie Sanders, who decided to leave early so that he could give his own version of this speech. And I don't know what he said tonight, because we were listening to the sometimes Republican Alyssa Slotkin. Yeah. But, like, that's the problem with the Democratic Party, is there's no one party. There's the left, represented by Bernie Sanders, and a moderate middle, more represented by Alyssa Slotkin.
Well, we're going to hear from a prominent Democrat right now who might take issue with that characterization. Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern is joined now live from Capitol Hill by California Senator Adam Schiff. Anne-Marie?
Thanks so much, Joe. Yeah, let's get the senator's take on what Rick was just talking about. They're talking about the fact that you have Senator Slotkin giving the response a little bit more of a moderate Democrat. At the same time, Bernie Sanders decided to leave the speech to give his own speech. Is the Democratic Party at this moment able to talk about policy with one voice?
Well, I think we're quite united on the fact that Donald Trump tonight gave Americans no reason to believe he was going to do anything about the struggles they're facing, nothing about bringing down the cost of goods. He spent more time talking about Greenland and about the Panama Canal than he did what he's doing to reduce prices. And, of course, in that department, he's been an abject failure. No wonder he wanted to avoid the subject. But, you know, keeping the focus on what he said, what he didn't say, so much firehood of falsehood about Social Security, so many hypocritical claims supporting law enforcement and then pardoning the people that beat police officers in this very space where we're standing. There was a lot to analyze in the president's speech, and none of it particularly good.
Is there something that you think you can work with your Republican colleagues on the rest of the year?
Well, it really depends on whether they're willing to stand up to this president. I would love to work with my Republican colleagues on supporting Ukraine, something that the vast majority of them believe, that we shouldn't be essentially catering to the Kremlin dictator. But you heard none of that in the speech tonight. No willingness to stand up to Putin. I would love to work on providing continued support for Ukraine. I'd love to work with my Republican colleagues on bringing down the cost of things. That is not the president's priority, though, and at this point, they are still in lockstep with him, as destructive as that march is.
Senator Adam Schiff, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Joe Cayley, of course, the senator from California, thinks the party can unite on just making sure they're targeting what they don't like, the criticisms they see when it comes to things like this evening, when you have Trump speaking on the chamber's floor.
Absolutely. With Ukraine among the topics we heard the president speaking about. Anne-Marie, thank you so much. And on the note of Ukraine, we turn back to Rick Davis and Jeannie Shan Zaino. Rick, it is notable. The president once again was talking about the money the U.S. has spent toward Ukraine, actually inflating it. He says it's $350 billion. The actual amount appropriated by Congress is $183 billion. And all of that even went directly to Ukraine. But when we consider that there were lawmakers, including the Speaker of the House, who was behind him for the duration of this address, who were supportive of passing that aid. Do you sense here that there could be a U.S. shift back toward Ukraine, given some of the other remarks President Trump made about how he was happy to receive that letter from Zelensky today?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think we're in a period of time where the Republican Party is singularly defined by Donald Trump. So if Donald Trump says that extra support to Ukraine would help give him a card to play with Vladimir Putin to get him to the peace table, they'll do that. If he says cut off aid like he did yesterday and suspend military assistance, they're going to say okay with us. So I think what we saw tonight was a president completely in command of his party. They stood up every time he finished a sentence and applauded. This is a party that he will dictate terms of their legislative agenda and the national agenda, and they will pull that rope anywhere he tells them to go. So I think, yes, I mean, I think that as long as Donald Trump has it in his mind that additional support to Ukraine, strengthen his hands to get peace, he made it totally clear he wants to stop the bloodshed on the border between Ukraine and Russia. And Ukraine will either benefit from that or pay a price.
Let's bring our audience right back to Capitol Hill now live. Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern has another member of the Trump administration standing by. Anne-Marie?
That's right. A new Secretary for Housing and Urban Development, Scott Turner. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. So the president outlined his agenda and a lot of his policies, but you're a brand new secretary. What are you hoping to achieve?
Well, you know, tonight was really a fantastic time and a powerful time in President Trump outlining the America First agenda. And as the Secretary of HUD, you know, we also have an America First agenda to serve the American people. At HUD, we serve the most vulnerable citizens in our country. And as far as priorities, you know, we have a housing affordability crisis in our country. And so we want to bring up the supply and decrease the costs, either by regulatory reform, by public-private partnerships. A couple weeks ago, we took down the AFFH rule, which was really a social engineering of neighborhoods. And so we want to bring back local control, decrease the costs, working with localities, bring federal costs down. And so homelessness in our nation, you know, went up 18%.
Doesn't so much of this have to do with where mortgage rates are right now? And that's pretty much out of your control. Do you see the housing market being able to move if mortgage rates are not coming down?
Well, you know, since President Trump came in, you know, mortgage rates have been coming down every week. And that's a big problem. And, you know, in America, people can't afford to buy houses because inflation is up, mortgage rates are up, the cost is up. And so we want to bring the cost down and increase the supply. And so President Trump on the first day signed an executive order, you know, to restore housing affordability and decrease the cost for every American in our country.
We do know that the Biden administration had a goal of making sure individuals, especially in rural areas, were able to access the internet through broadband. Now we're seeing a lot of reports that potentially they want to do away with that, but have individuals access Starlink. Do you think Elon Musk's Starlink should be used? I imagine this would come under your purview.
Well, actually, you know, HUD is housing. And as you know, when the hurricane hit North Carolina, Elon and Starlink were some of the first to restore their internet for people there in North Carolina. It really saved a lot of people's lives and families. And so we are hopeful, you know, that we can get more broadband and Starlink out to our rural families. And yes, you know, with housing, we also need housing in rural areas, workforce and affordable housing. And so working together with the other agencies, with our DOGE task force, with the president and the White House, we will restore and bring in housing to rural, urban, and tribal communities in our country.
Housing is a big issue for this election. Secretary, thank you so much for your time this evening. Of course, that was new Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Scott Turner there. His key focus, as you might expect, housing.
No surprise there. Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern in Statuary Hall. Thank you so much. Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzane are a signature political panel still with us. Jeannie, we did hear a bit about mortgage rates from the president today. He suggested that he's going to bring them down, or they will bring them down. That was one element of his economic messaging. But when you think about the speech in totality, all 100 minutes of it, was there enough of that in there for the American voter, given what we've seen suggested in polling leading up to this?
You know, I don't think there was. I mean, I think the president really missed an opportunity tonight, and that opportunity was to speak to the American public about what they are experiencing as they go to the grocery store. You know, this is a man who, 24 hours ago, put in place enormous tariffs, which will have impacts directly on the American public. And he didn't take the opportunity tonight to explain to them why they would be feeling this pain. In fact, he told farmers who are going to be feeling it to have some fun. And so it is that kind of message that just falls flat. And that's why, as you juxtapose that to what the senator from Michigan was talking about, she is 100% right, that there is a way to achieve change. She won in the same state Donald Trump did. There's a way to do things responsibly, and there's a recklessness. And he has been reckless with the economy so far, and he's been reckless with security.
How's this going to feel tomorrow, Rick? Everyone has a chance to sleep on it. We get a bunch of analysis, wake up to morning columns. Then we're going to look at futures when they open, reflecting on what you said earlier about the heart of this speech tonight being tariffs.
Yeah, anybody who was trading on the idea that Howard Lutnick was espousing earlier today that somehow these tariffs were going to be modified to a point where they didn't have a big impact, they're going to wake up with another sensibility. I think there's no daylight in this speech on what the Trump administration plans to do with the use of tariffs. And I was surprised. The one thing that I thought was something that the Trump administration could have bought into was the CHIPS Act. I mean, the idea that we've, allocated billions of dollars to spur chip development in the United States, I thought was an agenda item that Donald Trump would take from the Biden administration and embrace. But, oh, no, any monies that were not spent up to this point in time on the CHIPS Act are going to be recaptured and used to reduce the debt, at least, based on what Donald Trump said tonight. So, and at the same time, announcing that TSMC just yesterday was going to build a massive commitment of tens of billions of dollars to build more facilities here in the United States. So, look, I mean, I think there are a lot of people in the business community who will be looking with a fine-tooth comb to figure out what the pathway is going to be. I think you're going to see pretty much what you would have expected at the beginning of this administration.
I will point out that the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, just caught up with some reporters in Statuary Hall after leaving the chamber. He reiterated that there will be an announcement on tariffs on Canada and Mexico tomorrow. Jeannie, should we really expect this? It almost is tomorrow, in fact. It's 23 minutes to midnight.
I am holding my breath. I can't wait to find out, because the speech we heard, the president seemed to be doubling down on those tariffs. Could he change his mind? Certainly, and perhaps the Commerce Secretary knows what is coming, but it does not seem like what we heard from the president tonight. He seems very invested in pursuing a policy of tariffs, and it is a long-term commitment from the president.
You think we see a signing ceremony soon with President Zelensky?
I do think it's possible. He sounded like it would be possible
he was going to come down from the rafters at one point.
Yeah, and of course, that would be welcome by all of us. And the President Zelensky sent a very conciliatory message today. The president reiterated that. So if that is doable and that is possible, that is certainly welcome news. And I think that was the biggest news that was made tonight, in addition to the tariffs, was that we may see a deal with Zelensky.
We have less than a minute left here, Rick, but obviously we heard a lot from the president tonight about what he's done in the last 6 weeks. Can he keep up this pace for the next 6 weeks on tariff announcements or anything else?
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously hundreds of executive orders aren't going to be replicated in the course of, every 6 months. But the reality is that they are up to a fast pace. And I would imagine as these cabinet secretaries dig into their agencies, they're going to find things that they're going to be reversing and engineering on their own. So, yeah, I think this is going to be an administration, whether it's sustainable over years, we'll see. But I think this is going to be a year of massive change in Washington, and it's going to go on for quite some time to come.
This has been a great conversation with our signature panel, and many thanks to Jeannie Shanzano and Rick Davis for being with us on a special edition of Balance of Power. Many thanks to you as well, and get a jump on trading tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. Bloomberg TV and radio interviewing Commerce Secretary Lutnick. Anne Marie will have that conversation for us. For Kaylee Lyons, I'm Joe Matthew. More up next on Bloomberg TV and radio.
In case you missed it, on Bloomberg Crypto. Do you see a future in which Coinbase is competing with the banks for custody business?
Oh, absolutely. You know, our goal at Coinbase is to promote economic freedom. We welcome competition. We think banks are a critical part of the ecosystem. We actually do a fair amount of lobbying just to make sure their status and ability to engage in crypto activity is clear.